Eddard Stark blinked against the late afternoon sun. The crowd gathered before the steps of the great sept of Baelor seemed like a milling sea of fury and fascination, hungry for a spectacle that felt as old as time. He could hear the pulse of his own blood in his ears, every beat pounding with the knowledge that the next few moments could determine the fate not only of himself, but of his daughters, of House Stark, and perhaps of the realm itself. King Joffrey Baratheon, though Ned could not help but think of him as the boy in truth, the child born of Jaime and Cersei Lannister, sat upon a makeshift dais overlooking it all with a regal arrogance that seemed ill-fitting. Everything in Ned yearned to speak the truth. He had already confessed his so-called treason under the belief that it would secure his daughter Sansa's safety, and that the boy king would show him mercy, allowing him the quiet dignity to live out his days at the Wall. So many times he had wished to speak openly of Joffrey's illegitimacy, but the memory of Sansa's pleading eyes and the dire predicament of Arya, missing somewhere in the city, held his tongue. He had chosen the path of humility, and now he waited, heart in his throat, as Joffrey's lips parted in a cruel smile. "Ser Ilyn," the boy began. Ned felt his own breath catch. The executioner stood behind him, silent as death. "My mother and the council have advised me to show mercy," Joffrey continued. "They claim I am too hasty in my judgments." The silence that fell was thick with tension. In that moment, Ned saw Queen Cersei's eyes narrow, and Lord Varys hovered at the edge of the platform, an unreadable expression on his face. Sansa, tear-stained and desperate, stood near the queen, so small and trembling. Ned's mind flickered to his other children, Arya, Bran, Rickon, Robb, Jon. He wondered what they might think of him now. Joffrey's voice rose. "They say I should spare this traitor's life. Perhaps I should. He has confessed before the gods and all good men. A man who pleads for mercy might well receive it, if only to show how generous I am." "Nay." A sickening hush moved through the crowd. Ned waited, forcing himself to keep a stoic composure. His lips felt dry. If Joffrey showed mercy, would it actually be the Wall, as they had rumored? Or would this be a trick? The memory of ice-cold steel hovered at the edges of his consciousness. His father's voice, a ghostly echo, told him to stand tall. Joffrey inhaled dramatically as if savoring the tension. "Then, but a traitor must still pay a price," he said, turning a sharp smile upon the onlookers. "Let him be sent to the Wall to take the black. My mother and my counselors say that would show magnanimity, and that the realm might see me as a merciful king." For a single heartbeat, Ned could scarcely believe he had heard correctly. He looked at Cersei, who wore a guarded expression, her lips pursed. Perhaps she had indeed urged Joffrey toward mercy in hopes of quelling any northern rebellion. Or perhaps this was another cunning ploy to sow confusion. Yet as Joffrey paused, the boy's smile widened, and he gave a curt wave of his hand. "Take him to the black cells, until he departs for the Wall. Let him live out his dishonored life in the Night's Watch. Let him keep his head, for now." Ned's shoulders sagged with immeasurable relief. Sansa's face crumpled into tears. He felt the gentle hand of Ser Meryn Trant clamp on his arm, guiding him away. At the far edge, behind the lines of gold cloaks, Ned thought he glimpsed Arya darting through the crowd, but perhaps it was only wishful thinking. The last thing he remembered before disappearing into the corridors of the Red Keep was the collective roar of the crowd, as if a beast had been promised a feast only to have the best portion snatched away. The crowd had been cheated of a spectacle of blood, and it clamored with discontent. But Ned Stark, for the moment at least, still breathed. They took him to the dungeons, the darkest recesses of the Red Keep, though the Queen's order, or the King's, dictated he be kept alive. The corridor leading to his cell was damp, carved from black stone that seemed to sweat salt in old sorrow. When the heavy door slammed shut, he felt the finality of it echo through his bones. Confessing to a lie to save his children's lives had weighed upon his soul, but he would endure. The darkness engulfed him, broken only by a single torch guttering in its sconce. Time, as it always did in a cell, seemed to slow to an excruciating crawl. A day later, perhaps two. Time blurred in that pit. Varys appeared. The eunuch carried a small lantern, and the feeble light set shadows dancing along the walls. He wore the same soft slippers that made his footsteps all but silent. "My lord," Varys whispered, as if they were conspirators in a great crime. You have your life, you have the Night's Watch. It is more mercy than one might have expected from the boy. Thank you for whatever part you played in that mercy, Ned said quietly. Varys waved a dismissive hand. I am but a whisper carried by the wind. Your daughter's tears, your own confession, the Queen's counsel, they all played their part. He paused, glancing at Ned's gaunt features. I pray you will survive the journey north. And once at the wall, the realm's politics will fade. Perhaps, Lord Stark, you shall find some measure of peace there. Nay. Ned bowed his head. Peace was a foreign concept. He thought of Jon Snow, his bastard son, somewhere at Castle Black already. Perhaps there was a shadow of solace in that. He would see Jon again, though in a circumstance far more desperate than he had ever imagined. My daughters? He asked. The question felt like a blade twisting in his chest. Varys' eyes flickered. Sansa remains in the Red Keep, under the Queen's watchful eye. She is distressed but physically unharmed. As for Arya, she remains elusive, though my little birds suggest she fled the city. She may have encountered Yoren of the Night's Watch, who had some misgivings about leaving the child. But it seems they slipped away during your trial. Sansa. A small sense of relief passed through Ned. Arya was out of the city. That was more than he could have hoped for. He pressed his fingers into the grime of the floor. Tell Sansa, he began. But his words failed. Tell her I love her and that I will write to her when I can. Even as he said it, he felt the impossibility. He was to be a black brother, stripped of titles, honor, and the ability to be a father in any real sense. Yet he could still keep her in his heart. Varys nodded. I shall do what I can. And with that, the spider was gone, leaving Ned alone again with his thoughts. The day of his departure, if indeed day it was, for the black cells gave no hint of the sun. They came for him at a time that felt like the middle of the night. A cadre of gold cloaks lined the corridor, though none looked him in the eye. Ser Meryn Trant accompanied them silent and stern, and they led him through the twisting tunnels of the Red Keep, up winding staircases, and finally into the courtyard. Ned blinked at the sudden brightness. It was dawn. He felt the cold air nip at his cheeks. They had cleaned him only enough to make him presentable. The stench of the dungeon still clung to him, but at least he was not in rags. He wore black breeches and a plain black tunic. No cloak. No finery. The gold cloaks parted, revealing a narrow cart with a single driver. Before he could mount, another figure stepped forward. Joffrey d'Artigues. The boy wore a smug expression and carried a small scepter. You're lucky, Stark, he said. Mother says it is wise to show restraint. Grandfather once told me that mercy can be used as a tool against your enemies to keep them off guard. But remember this mercy, and remember who gave it. His pale eyes glittered, as if daring Ned to protest. Ned kept silent. Nothing he could say would change his fate. He studied the boy king's face, trying to read if there was any flicker of genuine humanity. He found none. If anything, there was a twisted disappointment lurking, as though Joffrey had truly wanted to see him executed. Perhaps in deferring to the counsel of others, Joffrey felt cheated of the full measure of dramatic cruelty. Take him away, Joffrey commanded, glancing toward the driver. Then he turned and strode off, flanked by the king's guard. In that moment, Ned's gaze drifted upward, toward the tall towers of the Red Keep. He thought he saw a shape, a flicker of motion, Sansa, perhaps, or merely a reflection. But he had no time to dwell. The gold cloaks urged him onto the cart, and a moment later, the driver whipped the horse into motion. The city gates awaited, and beyond them the king's road. The journey north was a bleak affair. The gold cloaks, numbering a dozen, rode around him in a loose perimeter. They did not speak to him. They were neither cruel nor kind, content to ignore him as best they could. At nights, they made camp off the main road, building small fires. Ned, shackled at the wrists, sat apart. The men said little, and he rarely tried to engage them. His thoughts churned endlessly, returning time and again to Winterfell, to his daughters, to the betrayal that had led him to this place. He wondered if, back in Winterfell, Robb had already called the banners. The last he'd heard Robb had been marching south with the northern lords. Would they accept the peace Joffrey's mercy entailed, or would they push onward, outraged that their lord had been threatened with death and forced into the black? Perhaps war would still come, the tides unstoppable. Perhaps the Lannisters' cunning had only delayed it. Ned prayed that somehow, reason would prevail, sparing the north of further bloodshed. It took many days to reach the Neck, and as the landscape changed from the rolling farmlands south of the Trident to the marshes of the Neck, the Gold Cloaks grew uneasy. They were southern men, unaccustomed to the bogs and the clouds of biting insects. Their resentment bubbled over in muttered curses at night. Ned, for his part, took a grim satisfaction in the knowledge that they were as unhappy as he was, though that satisfaction was short-lived. Every day, he felt the weight of his shackles. He missed the crisp air of the north, the sense of belonging that Winterfell had given him since boyhood. Instead, he was an exile in truth now, bound for the Wall. They crossed Moat Cailin, that ancient fortress whose towers, shattered by centuries of neglect, loomed like broken sentinels. The Gold Cloaks eyed the swampy ruin warily but pressed on. Once north of the Neck, the air cooled further. It was the turning of the seasons, though how quickly winter would come remained a mystery. Ned thought of the old Stark words, "Winter is coming," and the significance they carried in his heart. The land felt weighed down by an unspoken tension. War had begun to stir in the south, alliances in flux, and the realm teetered on the edge of chaos. On the 20th day of their journey, they approached Winterfell. Though the escort had no orders to linger, they allowed Ned one final glimpse of his ancestral home. From a distance, the great granite walls stood tall against the sky. Tendrils of smoke curled from the chimneys. 1,000 memories pressed upon him at once, the sound of his children laughing in the courtyard, Catelyn's smile as she greeted him after a long journey, the hush of the Godswood where the heart tree watched over them all. Tears threatened to blur his vision, but he would not give the Gold Cloaks the satisfaction of seeing him weep. Instead, he stared unblinking, committing every stone to memory. He would never set foot there again, not as lord, not as husband and father. His life had been severed from Winterfell as surely as a limb hacked away. Now, the Night's Watch would be his only home. They did not enter the gates, nor did they announce themselves. The Gold Cloaks were uneasy at the proximity of the northern lords. They pressed on, circling around the perimeter to rejoin the King's Road, and that was Ned's farewell. By dusk, Winterfell was a dark silhouette on the horizon behind them. He felt hollow, as though he had left half his soul behind in that fortress of his ancestors. 2 more weeks carried them to the Wall. The great barrier of ice and stone rose before them on the final morning, a colossal sentinel that spanned the continent. Even from leagues away, Ned could see it shimmering in the pale sunlight, the wind howling around its frigid heights. He had always known the Wall was impressive, but seeing it now, knowing he was about to become a part of it, filled him with a deep, shuddering awe. To the south, the castle known as Castle Black nestled in the Wall's shadow, a sprawl of wooden structures and stone fortifications. It looked like a place perpetually at the edge of winter. The Gold Cloaks delivered Ned to the main courtyard of Castle Black. The place was scarcely bustling. A handful of black-clad brothers milled about, some tending to their duties, others eyeing the new arrivals with equal parts curiosity and caution. Among them, Ned recognized a lean figure. Jon Snow stood a short distance away, carrying buckets of water from the well. He froze as soon as his eyes fell upon Ned. For a moment, father and son simply stared at each other, too shocked to speak. Jon set down the buckets, stepping forward carefully as though he feared this might be a dream. "Ned Stark," announced the sergeant of the Gold Cloaks, dismounting with stiff formality. "By order of King Joffrey Baratheon, you have been remanded to the custody of the Night's Watch, stripped of all titles and lands, to serve for the remainder of your days. We are to receive a signed confirmation of his reception from Lord Commander Jorah Mormont." Jon, eyes wide, looked from Ned to the Gold Cloaks and back. He breathed out, "Father." Ned tried to speak, but a lump in his throat choked off the words. Finally, he managed, "Jon, my boy." His heart twisted at the sight of Jon in black, the living image of Ned's own youth in some ways. He realized with a pang that he had not seen Jon since the lad left for the Wall. Now, they were both to be sworn brothers, in a manner of speaking. Before Ned could say more, the door of the main hall banged open, and Lord Commander Jorah Mormont emerged, followed by a few other Black brothers, including the dour-faced first ranger. Benjen Stark was not among them. He was still missing, Ned recalled, and the weight of that fact joined the many sorrows in his heart. Mormont was a broad-shouldered man with a grizzled beard and fierce eyes. He surveyed the gold cloaks with barely concealed disdain. I am Jor Mormont, Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. This is Castle Black, under our jurisdiction. What is your business? Nay. One of the gold cloaks stepped forward, brandishing a parchment sealed with the royal crest. We bring Eddard Stark as a prisoner. He is to take the Black, by the orders of King Joffrey Baratheon. Mormont glanced at Ned, and if he was surprised, he hid it well. He's most welcome, the old bear said gruffly. We welcome any man who wears the Black in earnest. Sir, I will sign your confirmation that we have received him. He paused, his gaze intensifying. But know this. Once he takes the oath, he is a brother of the Night's Watch, and no realm, no king, may lay further claim on him. The gold cloak sergeant shrugged. That is the arrangement, Lord Commander. He passed over the parchment and quill. Mormont scrawled his signature. The man accepted it back, signaled to his men, and they rode out of Castle Black without a backward glance, apparently eager to be gone from the biting cold of the north. When the sound of hooves died away, Ned stood amid the Black brothers. Mormont regarded him solemnly. Lord Stark, he began, but Ned lifted a hand to forestall him. Just a man now, Lord Commander, Ned said. A Black brother, or soon to be. Jon stood beside him, still in shock. Father, how, why? Mormont gestured toward the main hall. We can speak inside. You'll need a hot meal and some place to rest. Then, if you are resolved, you shall say your vows before the weirwood in the haunted forest, or in the sept if you prefer. Ned shook his head, the heaviness in his heart unshakable. I will say them before the old gods, he murmured. My gods. Mormont acknowledged that with a curt nod. They headed into the hall, past the thick wooden doors reinforced with iron. Inside, Castle Black's main hall was sparsely decorated and colder than Ned had expected, though there was a roaring fire and a great hearth at one end. A few Black brothers lingered at the tables, eating stew from wooden bowls. They cast curious glances at Ned, but none spoke. Mormont led Ned, along with Jon and a few of the senior officers, to a small side chamber that served as a meeting room. There, in the flickering glow of lanterns, Mormont asked Ned to recount the events that had brought him here. In a low, measured tone, Ned told them of his discovery of Joffrey's parentage, his attempt to place Stannis Baratheon on the throne, and the betrayal that ended with him imprisoned. Jon listened intently, his face taut with emotion. When Ned finished, Mormont said, A dire predicament indeed, and now you are commanded to wear the Black. Some might say this is a second life of sorts. Ned gazed at the old bear. I would have chosen differently, but the choice was made for me once I confessed to a false treason. My life was spared, and I must honor that by upholding my oath here, in the only way left to me. Mormont's eyes flicked to Jon, who stood a few paces away, fists clenched. Well, Lord, that is, well, Brother Stark, the Night's Watch can use a man of your experience, though I had hoped you might aid us in other ways. We are short of good swords. We can use you if you'll have it. Ned nodded once. I am yours to command, Lord Commander. Mormont's eyebrows drew together. Then, rest. Tomorrow you'll say your vows. After that, we'll see about where best to place you. But if I were to guess, you'll be training recruits. A man like you will command respect. Nethor, Anna. With that decided, Mormont dismissed the gathering. Before Ned could depart, Jon caught his elbow, his voice thick with pent-up questions. Father, this is all wrong. You? Ned pressed a hand to Jon's shoulder. I'm grateful to be alive and to see you again. Of all the possibilities, this is not the worst. Jon nodded, but his eyes shone with unshed tears. Still, you do not deserve this. Ned allowed a small wry smile. There are many things in life we do not deserve, for good or ill. Let us make the best of what remains to us. They embraced, father and son, bound now by the Black, an unthinkable twist of fate that had shaped them both. The warmth of that moment contrasted sharply with the chill that lingered in the air. The cold of the wall was ever present, as was the knowledge that beyond it lay countless dangers. Ned had always heard rumors of the others, the White Walkers, stories he had once dismissed as children's tales. But now he sensed something stirring, a distant threat that made the realm's squabbles seem petty. He felt it in his bones, the hush of the north whispering that winter's darkest secrets were close at hand. The next day, before the heart tree in the haunted forest, Ned knelt in the snow, the bark of the weirwood, white as bone, the red sap like fresh blood. Jon stood beside him. Samwell Tarly, Gren, and a few other brothers observed solemnly. Ned spoke the words of the vow, his breath steaming in the cold air. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. No, nine. Every word cut deeper than any blade could. Though he had come to the Night's Watch as a concession for his life, now, in that place of ancient power, Ned felt the enormity of it. He knew he was severing his ties to the world he had known, to Winterfell, to his wife, to his remaining children. His life as Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, was over. Here, he would be simply Ned, a brother of the Watch. This night and all the nights to come, he whispered, finishing the vow. The old gods bore silent witness, their carved faces weeping red tears. And in that moment Ned felt something pass from him, a sense of finality. There was sorrow, but also a strange clarity. He was a man reborn into duty. Jorah Mormont received him warmly upon his return from the grove. Well, Brother Ned, you'll bunk with the other officers for the moment. As for your assignment, I'd have you help Eliezer Thorne with the training of new recruits. He's a difficult man, but it may benefit the boys to have a second instructor, one more, measured. A faint flash of irony passed through Ned. Only a few moons ago, Sir Eliezer had been training Jon. Now, Ned would be working alongside the man. As you command, Ned said. The courtesy of bowing felt odd, but he did it. He was no longer a lord, and Mormont was his superior. Eliezer Thorne greeted the news with icy resentment. The master-at-arms of Castle Black was a hard-faced man with a thin-lipped sneer. He made it plain he considered Ned's presence an intrusion, no matter his former station. I hear you're a traitor to your king, forced to wear black, Thorne said. Seems to me you should be training with the Green Boys yourself. Ned responded in a measured tone. I serve the Watch now, same as you, the rest is in the past. Thorne sniffed, unimpressed. We'll see what you can do. And with that, he set about ignoring Ned as much as possible, focusing on barking orders at the gawky recruits who swung wooden swords with uncertain grips. Ned soon found that the watchmen were indeed short on everything. Short on warm bodies to patrol the wall. Short on food, short on funds. The recruits ranged from younger sons of minor lords to convicted criminals who had chosen the wall over a noose. They needed all the help they could get, and Ned threw himself into that duty. He corrected stances, demonstrated sword technique, and offered calm advice. His presence and the quiet authority that clung to him garnered respect from most of the recruits. Even the more recalcitrant ones found it hard to mouth off to Ned Stark, though he rarely reminded them of who he used to be. Within days, word spread through Castle Black that Eddard Stark had joined the Watch. Whispers abounded. Some said he had forsaken his honor for survival. Others thought it a cunning plan to unite the North behind him. Ned paid them no mind. He spent his days training the recruits, his evenings poring over the histories and records of the Watch, and his nights drifting into restless sleep, haunted by dreams of Winterfell's halls. The memory of his children's laughter seemed to echo in the cold stones of the old fortress. Jon was ever at his side. When their duties allowed, they walked along the top of the wall together. The wind was fierce up there, cutting through even the warmest cloak. The icy expanse stretched on, a testament to the power of the old magic that built it. Once, as they gazed upon the vast northern wilderness, Jon asked, "What will become of the North now that you are here?" Ned exhaled, watching his breath vanish. "Robb is of age. He is the Lord of Winterfell in my stead, even if the throne does not recognize him. Perhaps they will come to terms. Perhaps not. There will be war if the Lannisters push too hard." He paused, remembering the rumors that Robb had already called the Banners. "I have to trust my son to do what is best for our people," and I must fulfill my oath here." Jon nodded slowly, grappling with the unspoken worry that war might tear the North apart. The fact that their father now wore black, that he stood beside Jon on the wall, changed the nature of all these concerns. They were watchers on the walls now, guardians against threats that most of the realm dismissed. Perhaps, Ned mused, his presence here could unify the North's sense of duty toward the Watch, if the realm understood the severity of what lay beyond. As the days turned into weeks, Ned settled into the rhythms of Castle Black. He rose before dawn, broke his fast on porridge or bread if it was available, and joined the recruits in the yard. He sparred, corrected, and demonstrated. The recruits soon realized that Lord Stark was as competent as he was patient, and they gravitated toward him, preferring his instruction to Thorne's scathing insults. That only made Thorne bristle more, though he dared not openly defy Mormont's arrangement. In the evenings, Ned sometimes spoke with Maester Aemon, an aged man whose blind eyes saw more clearly than most. Aemon recognized Ned's voice with an almost uncanny insight. "Lord Stark," he would say gently, and Ned would demur, "Just call me Ned, Maester. I am no lord anymore." Aemon would smile a secretive smile, and they would talk of ancient histories, of Targaryen kings, of winter and what it might bring. Ned found a measure of peace in those conversations. There was a dignity in service, something that had always appealed to his sense of honor. Though he missed his family desperately, he reminded himself that he had chosen this path to save them. That knowledge steadied him in the quiet hours of the night. Time slid by, marked by the changing weather which grew colder. The Black brothers spoke in hushed tones of strange sightings in the woods, whispers of whites and worse. Rangers went beyond the wall and sometimes did not return. The sense of looming danger thickened the air. One early morning, Samwell Tarly came rushing to Ned and Jon, breathless with fear, saying that Ghost Jones Direwolf had been howling like mad, pacing near the gates. "Something spooked him," Sam gasped, eyes wide. "He never acts like that without reason." Ned, his instincts sharpened by a lifetime of wariness, felt the prickle of an oncoming storm. "We should tell the Lord Commander. We might need to send scouts." Jon was already jogging toward the kennel area where ghosts sometimes wandered. Ned followed, and they found the white direwolf with hackles raised, snarling at the tunnel leading beyond the wall. Jon placed a calming hand on Ghost's head, but the beast trembled with tension. That day, a scouting party was sent north, led by a seasoned ranger named Harker. They were to verify whether wildlings or something worse had come near. Ned volunteered to go, but Mormont refused. "We need you here, Ned. I will not risk losing you on a hunch." So Ned remained, uneasy, as the group vanished into the vast forest. Days passed with no word. Finally, 2 men limped back near dusk on the 5th day, speaking of an ambush. They claimed whites had risen, attacking without warning. Harker was gone, as were most of the party. The news set Castle Black on edge. The talk of White Walkers that once might have been dismissed as fables was no longer so easily ignored. Ned himself found a creeping dread in the pit of his stomach. He recalled old stories old Nan used to tell in Winterfell about the long night. How much truth lay in those tales. Mormont held a council in his solar, a cramped room lined with dusty books and old maps. The Lord Commander was grim, gray brows drawn low. "If the dead walk, we must prepare," he said. "We have too few men, and the realm is at war with itself. Still, we must do our duty." Ned added, "We could send ravens to Winterfell, to the lords of the north, urging them to send men. My son Robb is in the field, but perhaps some lordlings remain at their keeps." Mormont stroked his beard. "We'll send ravens, yes, but how many will heed them? War in the south is the talk of every hall. They think this talk of others is old wives' tales." Aye. Still, the ravens were sent. Ned wrote to Robb, trying to find words that would not compromise his vow to the Watch, but still convey the urgency. He wrote also to Catelyn, though that letter was briefer, more guarded. He spoke of love and duty, stating he was alive, and that he hoped their family would remain strong. He never knew if that letter reached her, for replies were slow or non-existent. In the midst of this unease, Castle Black received a visitor. A sworn brother from Eastwatch by the Sea arrived with urgent news. A small boat carrying wildlings had been sighted, fleeing something. The refugees claimed that the others were on the move, that entire villages in the far north were being snuffed out. Mormont listened with stoic composure but wasted no time. He ordered an expedition to gather more information, planning to ride beyond the wall himself. Jon came to Ned that night, eyes alive with determination. "The Lord Commander says I can go with him, Father. We'll find out what's really happening out there." Ned felt a stab of worry. "Take no foolish risks. These are not ordinary times. If the dead truly walk, you must be vigilant." Jon nodded, tension etched in his features. "I will be. But we must do something." They set out 3 days later, Jorah Mormont leading a group of about 200 men, well armed and provisioned. Ned wanted to ride as well, but Mormont tasked him with holding Castle Black in his stead. "You and Bowen Marsh will keep the peace here. See to training and supplies. The watch needs leadership on both sides of the wall." So Ned stayed behind, wearing a heavy cloak against the biting wind, watching his son and the old bear disappear into the tunnel. Ghost padded alongside Jon, silent and watchful. Ned's heart clenched. He prayed to the old gods for their safe return. The weeks that followed were a trial of patience. Castle Black felt emptier without those 200 men. The watchmen who remained did their best to keep routine, though dread lingered in every corner. Occasionally, messages arrived by Raven from the war-torn south. The rumor was that Robb Stark had won a victory at the Whispering Wood, capturing Jaime Lannister. Another rumor claimed that Renly Baratheon had declared himself king. The realm was fracturing. Ned read every scrap of news with an aching heart. He yearned to help Robb, to guide him. But that life was gone. Here on the wall, he had a new duty. The war in the south was as distant as another land. Some nights, he would stand atop the wall, gazing into the swirling darkness, uncertain what weighed heavier on his mind, the unstoppable chaos of the realm or the nightmare rumored to be creeping out of the far north. After a month, a few rangers trickled back with reports. The expedition had traveled as far as Craster's Keep, an infamous homestead of a wildling ally named Craster. They had gleaned that Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall, was gathering his people. Darkness was afoot, with rumors of undead creatures roaming the forests. Then, communications ceased. Ned feared the worst. Time dragged. Castle Black tried to maintain vigilance, doubling patrols. One cold dawn, Ned stood on the ramparts when the horn blew 3 times. The watchers stirred in alarm, for 3 blasts meant others. Ned dashed to the courtyard, shouting for the men to form up. Fear and adrenaline coursed through him. The last time 3 horn blasts had sounded at Castle Black was so far back in legend that some believed it never truly happened. The watchmen scrambled for swords and spears, half of them shaking with dread. But when the gates opened, they saw not an army of undead, but a disorganized band of Black brothers, half of them wounded or near collapse. Jon Snow stumbled at the forefront, dragging the Lord Commander, who was bleeding from a savage slash across his chest. Others limped behind, clothes torn and faces haunted by terror. The watchers helped them inside, and the gate slammed shut. Chaos erupted in the yard as men rushed to give aid. Ned knelt beside Mormont, who clung to life. "What happened?" Ned asked, his voice trembling at the sight of so many battered men. "Where are the rest?" Jon's face was chalk white. "They're gone," he said hoarsely. "We were attacked in the night. The Whites. They came upon us in force. We tried to fight, but they wouldn't stay down." He swallowed hard. "We lost so many. Sam Grennan and I barely got away with the Lord Commander. Half the men scattered. We saw no sign of them after." Ned pressed a hand to Mormont's neck, checking for a pulse. The old bear was alive, but his breathing was shallow. Ned shouted for the maester. Then he met Jon's eyes and recognized raw trauma in them. "Help me carry him," Ned commanded, and they hoisted Mormont between them, rushing him to the infirmary. The hours that followed were frantic. Maester Aemon did what he could, applying poultices and stitching wounds, but many men succumbed. Mormont clung to life, feverish. In his delirium, he muttered of white shadows and an oncoming storm. Ned took temporary command by necessity. The living rangers told horrifying tales of corpses rising from the ground, attacking with inhuman strength. Some said they heard the shriek of an ice-cold wind that froze the blood. Others wept openly, recounting the eyes of the whites, pale and lifeless but filled with malevolence. Jon stood vigil by the Lord Commander's bedside, refusing to leave even for rest. Ned gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did well to bring him back. You saved him." Jon nodded, eyes distant. "I feel a coward for running. So many brothers died. You did your duty. You brought back what remains of this force. That is not cowardice, Jon." Jon lowered his gaze. "We can't fight them alone." Ned gripped his son's arm. "We'll find a way. We must warn the realm." They dispatched more ravens than ever before, detailing the threat. Ned wrote to all the northern lords he knew, as well as to the Eerie, to River Run, even to King's Landing, although he doubted the new king would heed any warning from a man he considered a traitor. Word needed to spread, or the realm would be caught unprepared if the darkness ventured beyond the wall. For days, Castle Black lived in a state of grim alert. Rangers ventured north in pairs, no more than a league or two beyond the wall, to search for survivors. Some returned with more wounded men who had been found wandering, half dead from exposure. Others reported fresh horrors, entire enclaves of wildlings lying silent, as if taken in the night. Whatever had happened, it was bigger than one raiding party or random attack. Finally, one ragged group of wildlings arrived at the wall seeking refuge. Among them was a wiry man with wild gray hair, who named himself Dolph. He spoke the common tongue passably and claimed Mansraider was gathering an enormous host to flee south of the wall. "We're running," he said, eyes flicking with fear. "You crows might hate us, but what's behind us is worse. The others come." Ned conferred with Bowen Marsh, Jon, and a few senior officers left. "If Mance leads a vast host, they might try to breach the wall. If they do, we cannot hold them." Bowen Marsh shook his head. "And what if the wildlings bring the others with them?" Ned frowned. "We must prepare for that possibility." The deeper truth was that the realm's petty wars had rendered the Night's Watch too weak to repel a massive invasion, let alone face an undead threat. Ned realized with a chill that if unity was not found, the living might all perish beneath winter's shadow. Duty rose in his chest. He wanted to ride south, speak to Robb, rally the North to defend the wall, but as a black brother, he could not. The vow bound him here. He could do nothing but write more letters, send more pleas. A fortnight later, Jorah Mormont finally regained consciousness. He was weak, but determined. "We must gather every man we can," he rasped. "We will need to treat with Mansraider, see if we can learn more of these others. We cannot hold the wall if we are fighting both wildlings and the dead." He turned to Ned, fixing him with a heavy gaze. "I need you, Ned, to lead a delegation beyond the wall to speak with Mance. Jon is too young, and I am too weak. You have the name, the station, former station, and the sense to handle this. Will you do it?" Ned drew a slow breath, thinking of the danger. Yet if the future of the realm rested on forging an uneasy peace with the wildlings, he could not refuse. "I will go," he said, mind already reeling at the magnitude of this task. "I will do what must be done." Jon grabbed his father's forearm later that day, concern lighting his features. "You might not come back. Look what happened to us last time we ventured out there." Ned clasped his hand in return. "And if I do not, you must carry on the watch. Promise me you will guard the realms of men, come what may." Jon's jaw tightened. "I promise." They set forth at sunrise, 30 men on horseback, plus supplies for a fortnight. The wind bit at their faces as they passed through the wall's great gate. The forest beyond was dark and deep, the snow underfoot thick. Every snap of a twig made them jumpy, each scanning the horizon for movement. They traveled cautiously for 3 days, following the rough directions gleaned from the wildlings at Castle Black. On the 4th day, they saw signs of a large encampment. Trampled paths, smoke rising in the distance. They approached under a makeshift flag of truce, a white cloth tacked to a spear. The wildling sentries intercepted them with arrows nocked. Ned dismounted, raising empty hands. "I come to speak with Mansraider," he said, voice carrying in the cold air. "I am Ned Stark, once Lord of Winterfell, now a brother of the Night's Watch." The wildlings exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, tall and scarred, finally gestured for them to follow. The tension was palpable. Some in Ned's party frowned, certain this was a fool's errand. But Ned steeled himself. He thought of the unstoppable tide of the others, the horror in the ranger's eyes. If there was any chance of forging a truce, they had to try. They were led to a broad clearing where hundreds of wildlings had set up crude tents. Animals milled about, children clung to their mothers, and warriors roamed with spears. At the center stood a man in ragged fur and a worn cloak of black, clearly once a brother of the Watch. "Mance Raider," he greeted Ned with a wary smile. "Eddard Stark, the Honorable Lord of Winterfell." He let out a sardonic chuckle. "Though I hear you wear black as well these days." "I do," Ned replied. "And you know why I am here." Mance nodded. I do. The Dead Walk. We cannot remain in the far north. We've come to tear down the wall if we must, but the truth is, we'd rather live than die. If you crows have any sense, you'll open the gates." "No." Ned took a moment, gauging the man who once served under Corin half-hand. "We cannot simply open the gates and let a vast host pour into the realm. Our lords would see that as invasion. But we also cannot fight a war on two fronts. Against you and the others, we propose a truce, a way south for your people, if you pledge to help us defend the wall." Mance's eyes flickered with surprise, or perhaps cautious hope. "Help you defend the wall? Against an enemy none of you truly believe in until it's too late?" Ned pressed on. "I believe. The Watch believes. And those who do not soon will. You are the king beyond the wall. If you speak for your people, then let us speak for ours. There must be a way that spares needless bloodshed." Now and now. Mance studied Ned, seeing in him not just a crow, but the quiet authority that had once made him Warden of the North. "I left the Watch because I found more freedom in the wild, but I see the sense of uniting now." He ran a hand through his wild hair. "You think the Southern Lords will accept the presence of free folk if the Watch vouches for us?" Ned let out a breath. "I cannot speak for all lords, but I can speak for the North and for the Watch. The alternative is slaughter, for all of us, when the others come." There was a long silence as snow drifted between them. Finally, Mance dipped his head. "We will talk, Crow. We will talk." The days that followed were a delicate dance of negotiation. Ned spoke with Mance in his great tent, flanked by wildling leaders like Tormund Giantsbane, a boisterous man with a red beard and a hearty laugh, and Ygritte, a young spearwife, who eyed Ned with open curiosity, having once known Jon Snow. They hammered out tentative terms. The free folk would help man the wall, or at least not tear it down, and in exchange the Watch would permit a controlled crossing into the Gift, the stretch of land south of the wall, to resettle far enough to be safe from the others. All of it hinged on whether the realm would abide by such an arrangement. Ned knew that was the uncertain part. With the Lannisters, the Baratheons, and his own son Robb in open conflict, who had the authority to confirm such an unprecedented agreement. Still, they had to try. The free folk would not wait forever. They feared the others more each day. So with a final handshake, an agreement in principle, they parted ways. Mance promised not to advance further until Ned had returned with an answer, but he cautioned it would not be a long wait. The others would keep pressing. Returning to Castle Black, Ned's mind whirled with the enormity of what lay ahead. If the Southern Lords refused, if the war overshadowed this threat, would he have to stand alone with a handful of Black brothers against the rising dead and the unstoppable wave of wildlings desperate to flee? When he reached the wall, he found Jorah Mormont still weakened but conscious, poring over a map. Jon stood nearby, tension in every line of his body. They listened as Ned recounted his discussions with Mance. Mormont let out a long breath. "It is as I feared. We will need the support of the great houses, or this will be a disaster." Jon said quietly, "We can send more ravens, but who will read them? The Lannisters, the Baratheons, maybe even the Tyrells. They're all fighting over who sits the Iron Throne." Ned's jaw clenched. "Then perhaps we must do more than send letters." He paused, grappling with his vow. "I can ride to Winterfell and speak directly with my son, the king in the north. If he's crowned himself such, maybe he wields enough authority to aid us. From there, we approach the Riverlands, the Vale, whoever we can." Mormont studied Ned with a grave expression. "You are a sworn brother. You cannot simply ride south to rejoin the realm's politics. Yet, we are in extraordinary times. Will the Watch see this as a breach of your vow, or an extension of your duty to protect the realm? Ned exhaled. I would do nothing for personal gain. I go as an emissary of the Watch. There is no other choice. Someone must speak face to face with the leaders of the North. Letters will not convey the urgency. Mormont nodded. Very well. You have my blessing if it must be so. But be quick. We do not know how long we have. That night, Ned prepared to depart. Jon approached him, eyes filled with a storm of emotions. You're truly going to see Robb? To treat with him as a black brother? Yes, Ned said softly. If Robb truly is king in the North, I must make him understand the threat. We cannot remain divided. Jon gripped the hilt of his sword. Then let me come, father. I want to fight for our home. He caught himself. But I swore an oath. Ned's heart twisted with pride and sorrow. Your place is here, Jon. The Watch needs you more than ever. You are sworn to defend the Wall. I am only going because I must secure help for the Wall. Stay, lead them if you must. I pray you never face the Whites again, but if you do, you must be strong. Jon nodded, though regret tinged his features. I will. I promise. They embraced, father and son, feeling the weight of the world pressing in. With a dozen men for escort, most of them volunteers from the Watch willing to carry the mission's banner, Nen set out south once more, forging a path away from the battlements. The cold wind tugged at his cloak. Castle Black's silhouette receded behind him, a lonely fortress in a land of ice. Beyond it, the Wall loomed tall and foreboding. Ned did not know if he would ever see it again, but if he failed, the entire realm might be at risk. They pushed through the roads of the North, passing deserted villages where the men had marched south, or else joined Robb's army. Occasionally they encountered small folk fleeing the approach of armies, or caravans of merchants who carried tales of battles and burned holdfasts. Ned pressed on, determined to reach the main northern host. By the time they approached Moat Cailin, he heard from travelers that Robb Stark's army had marched south to engage Tywin Lannister's forces somewhere near the Twins. Ned cursed the complexities of the war. He altered course to find the king in the north, wherever the banners might be. Along the way, he and his black brothers were met with suspicion. More than once they encountered northern outriders who demanded to know their business. When Ned gave his name, men looked stunned, disbelieving. Some had heard rumors that Ned Stark was dead, others that he was a hostage. Now here he stood, wearing the black cloak, proclaiming he was on a mission from the Night's Watch. Eventually, word reached Robb's camp that Eddard Stark, his father, was coming under a flag of the Watch. The tension of that moment was immense. Ned recalled the last time he had seen Robb, a young man, uncertain but resolute in calling the banners. Now the boy was said to be a king, hardened by battle. Would he greet Ned with scorn for sacrificing his lordship, or with gratitude for being alive? When Ned arrived at the camp, he found it sprawling across a wide river plain. Northern banners fluttered in the breeze. The direwolf of Stark, the sunburst of Karstark, the flayed man of Bolton, the merman of Manderley. Guards ushered Ned to the center where a large command tent stood. Outside Grey Wind, a massive direwolf, snarled softly at the black-clad visitors, until Robb Stark emerged. Robb wore mail and leather, a sword at his side, his hair longer and his face older than Ned remembered. He halted at the sight of his father. In that instant, the facade of the young king cracked, and he rushed forward. "Father!" he exclaimed, clasping Ned's shoulders, pulling him into an embrace. Others in the camp stared, unsure how to respond. Some dropped to a knee instinctively, as if Ned were still their lord. Ned let out a trembling breath. "Robb, my son." They separated, and Robb surveyed Ned with wet eyes. I heard you were executed. Then rumors said you were on the Wall, or that you were... I didn't know what to believe." Ned nodded. "Joffrey spared my life after I confessed to treason. Under condition I joined the Night's Watch. I have been serving there these last months." Emotions warred on Robb's face. Relief, anger, confusion. "Come inside," he said hoarsely, gesturing to the tent. "We'll talk." Ned explained everything as men loyal to House Stark watched in stunned silence. Catelyn Stark entered partway through, her face ashen with disbelief. She gasped at the sight of Ned in black, tears slipping down her cheeks. Ned wanted to reach for her, but he remembered his vow. He was no longer her husband in the eyes of the watch. Still, he murmured her name softly, and she clutched his hand, all decorum forgotten in that moment. At length, Ned told them of the threat beyond the wall, the undead they had faced, the precarious truce with Mansraider. We need men, Rob. We need them now. Winter may be upon us sooner than we think, and with it, horrors we have not seen in thousands of years. Nay. Ow. Rob's counsel stirred uneasily. The Great John, Rickard Karstark, Roose Bolton, and others exchanged uneasy glances. The king in the north inhaled deeply, a muscle feathering in his jaw. And what of the war with the Lannisters? The south kills our men and ravages our lands. We have sworn to avenge ourselves upon them. Ned's voice hardened with urgency. Vengeance will mean nothing if the entire realm falls to an endless night. My father used to say that the only war that matters is the one against death. That time has come, my son. Nay, not niece. Roose Bolton interjected, voice soft. If we march the northern army back to the wall, we can cede the field to the Lannisters. They will ravage the Riverlands unopposed. The Great John growled. We cannot abandon our allies, yet we cannot ignore what Lord Stark says. Ned glanced at Catelyn, whose face was stricken. She spoke in a careful tone. We must find a way to secure peace, at least temporarily. Or an alliance. If the Lannisters realize the danger, perhaps they too will put aside the war. No. Rob rubbed his temples. Would they? Joffrey shows no mercy, and we hold Jaime Lannister as our prisoner. That is our one bargaining chip. If we parley for peace, we could demand men to defend the wall in exchange for Jaime. But would the Lannisters honor any truce? A hush fell, broken only by the rustling of tent fabric in the wind. Ned could see the conflict in Rob's eyes. Duty to his bannermen warred with the knowledge that a greater threat loomed. At last, Rob said, we can at least send men. Perhaps not the entire northern host, but a significant force. As many as we can spare while maintaining our position here. Ned nodded, relief mingled with trepidation. Time is short. Even a few thousand men could be the difference. The next hour saw a flurry of discussions. A portion of the northern army would return with Ned, led by one of the great lords, perhaps the Umbers or the Karstarks, while Rob remained in the field with the bulk. They would attempt to broker a ceasefire with the Lannisters, offering Jaime in exchange for recognition of the threat and a willingness to send men north. Catelyn would negotiate with Renly Baratheon or Stannis if needed, all in the desperate hope of uniting the realm against the others. Late that evening, Ned found himself alone with Catelyn for the first time. The tent was lit by a single lantern, casting long shadows. She studied him, eyes full of sorrow. My lord husband, she said quietly, or do I still call you that? Ned swallowed, the vow clanging in his head. I am sworn to the watch, but you will always be my wife in my heart. That, they cannot take away. Tears shone in her eyes. I thought I had lost you. I prayed every night to the seven, to the old gods, for your safety. Her voice wobbled. And now here you are, yet we are apart still. He took her hand, brushing his thumb across her knuckles. It is better than death. If I can help save our children, save the realm, then let this be my penance for whatever mistakes I've made. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. She pressed her cheek to his palm. They stayed like that, locked in a moment that felt both tender and unbearably sad. The war horns outside eventually broke the silence, summoning the officers to discuss marching orders. With regret, Ned and Catelyn separated, returning to their duties. Duty was all they had left. In the days that followed, Ned oversaw the organization of the northern contingent that would ride to the wall. Lord Rickard Karstark volunteered to lead the force. His face was grim, still mourning the loss of his sons, but he recognized that a threat to all the living dwarfed any personal vendetta. They mustered 5,000 men, foot, some cavalry, archers from the Wolfswood. It was not enough to hold off a southern army, but perhaps it would be enough to bolster the watch against wildlings and whites alike. Ned parted from Rob and Catelyn with a final embrace. Stay safe, he urged. I pray we meet again in better times. Rob inclined his head. I will do what must be done, father. May the old gods and the new watch over you, my son, Ned said, voice thick with emotion. Then he turned to mount his horse. The black cloak fluttered around him, marking him as neither lord nor king, but as a watcher on the walls of the realm. The men formed up behind him, an army riding north to face nightmares the south scarcely believed in. Their journey was swift and somber, passing again through Moat Cailin and the open moors of the north. Along the way, villagers who had fled the war saw the banners of House Stark and Karstark and found hope in them. Some even joined, vowing to fight for the living. By the time they neared the wall, their numbers had swelled. Though the men were weary and half-frozen, their spirits were hardened by the knowledge of the coming storm. Finally, Castle Black's dark shape rose before them. The men looked upon the wall with awe. Some had never seen it before and whispered prayers. Ned rode at the head, feeling a strange mixture of relief and dread. This was his life now, the Black Fortress that would be his home until death. And he had brought an army to its doorstep in the faint hope of holding back the dead. Jon Snow was the first to greet him, hugging him fiercely. Gray-faced and tired, Jorah Mormont emerged from within the castle, nodding solemnly at the host that had arrived. "You brought men," the Lord Commander said, voice low with gratitude. "Perhaps we have a fighting chance." Ned swung down from his horse, meeting Mormont's gaze. "It's a start. More may come if the southern kings can be convinced." Mormont grunted. "We'd best prepare quickly. My rangers report that Mance Rayder's people are on the move. They might come to the wall soon, and behind them the others." Thus began a frantic stretch of fortifications. Karstark's men helped the Watch repair sections of the wall's defenses, erecting barricades and watchtowers. Scouts rode out daily, searching for signs of wildlings or worse. And always, the cold deepened, as if the land itself braced for a bitter struggle. Days bled into nights filled with anxious vigilance. The moon hung above like a pale specter. Sometimes Ned would find Jon standing atop the wall, looking out over the endless sea of forest. They would share a silent moment, father and son, not speaking, simply acknowledging the stark truth that everything had changed. Their family ties, their old lives, gone. What remained was the oncoming storm. Then one dawn, the horn sounded thrice, once, twice, thrice. The alarm echoed across Castle Black. Ned, armored in black leather and steel, rushed to the courtyard. Men scurried to defensive positions, swords rattling in scabbards. Karstark's archers hurried to the battlements. The yard erupted with urgent shouts. High above on the walkway of the wall, watchers pointed north. Through the swirling snow, a massive host appeared, torches bobbing like a field of fireflies in the grim half-light. Wildlings by the thousand making their way toward the gates. At their head, Ned could make out Mance Rayder on horseback. Tormund Giantsbane, Ygritte, and others flanked him. The host stretched far into the distance, families with children, old folk, and warriors carrying crude weapons. Behind them, the forest rustled strangely, a chill presence creeping through the air. Ned ascended to the top of the wall, ignoring the biting wind on his cheeks. The wildling army paused within earshot of the gates. Mance Rayder's voice, carried by a horn, rang out. "Eddard Stark! We come as agreed. Will you open the gates?" "No." Karstark's men grew uneasy. Roars of discontent rippled among the Black Brothers. They had never let such a host of wildlings pass. But Ned raised a hand. "Sound the horn," he commanded. "Once. Let them approach." A single blast signaled parley die. Ned descended to the ground level, accompanied by Jon, Mormont, and Karstark. They waited by the gate as a small party of wildlings approached on foot. Mance Rayder stood before them, his gaze flicking between the men on the walls and the Black Brothers behind Ned. "We do not come to conquer," Mance said, voice hoarse with tension. "We come to live. The others are at our backs, and if we fail they will sweep south in an endless tide." Ned nodded gravely. "We have prepared as best we can. The gates will open for you, but your warriors must help us defend the wall." Mance raised his chin. For a moment it looked as if he might refuse. Then he reached out and clasped Ned's forearm. "Hey, Crow. We'll fight, or we'll die. Let us hope the living still have a chance." "No, I need white key." So the watchers on the wall opened the ancient gates that had stood shut to wildlings for generations. One by one the free folk filed in, many wounded or starving, children clinging to their parents. Tormund bellowed orders to keep moving, to stay calm. The Black brothers stood watch, glaring distrustfully, but Ned urged calm. For every wildling warrior scowling back, there was a mother with a babe in arms or a frail elder leaning on a rough-hewn staff. War was overshadowed by desperation. At the top of the wall, a warning horn bleated. A brother shouted down, "Something's moving in the trees! By the gods, it's them! The dead are coming!" Chaos erupted. Mance turned to Ned. "We must close the gates, now, or they'll come through with us." Ned shouted for the gates to be barred. The few hundred wildlings already inside would have to stand with the night's watch. Thousands more remained outside, crying in alarm, pressed against the gate. "We can't abandon them!" shouted Jon, voice cracking. "They'll be slaughtered." Ned met Mance's stricken gaze. "If we open again, the dead will flood in too," Ned said, heart heavy. "We cannot risk it." A horrific scream rose beyond the walls, and all around them, the temperature plummeted. Night was falling, and a swirling white wind whipped over the encampment. Within moments, figures emerged from the tree line, pale, corpse-like, eyes glowing with an otherworldly blue. Whites in ragged clothes, some still clutching weapons in stiff hands. And behind them, shapes that moved with fluid grace, tall and slender, armed with blades that glinted like ice. The others had arrived. Men shouted, archers loosed arrows, the hiss of steel colliding with unnatural flesh echoed in the gloom. Ned's stomach lurched as he realized the entire realm had no idea of the nightmare unfolding here. This was no ordinary enemy. The whites pressed in, unstoppable unless they were met with fire or dragon glass. The watch had a limited supply of both. From atop the wall, watchers cast barrels of flaming oil down upon the mass of the undead. Screams, human and otherwise, pierced the night. In the flickering light, Ned saw entire rows of whites fall only to rise again a moment later, if the fire did not fully consume them. Terrified wildlings outside the gate pounded on the wood, begging for entry as the undead tore into their ranks. The noise was soul-rending. Ned rallied Karstark's men in the courtyard. "Archers to the walls, form ranks at the inner gate. We must hold," he bellowed. Jon took position near the front with Ghost at his side, the direwolf's fur bristling. Mance and Tormund joined the lines, eyes aflame with determination. They might be free folk, but they had no illusions about what awaited them if the wall fell. All night they fought. The ice creatures advanced in waves, rattling the gate with monstrous strength. Many men fell. Others deserted, fleeing deeper into Castle Black in panic. But most held their ground, hackles raised, determined not to yield. The clang of steel against unnatural flesh created a discordant chorus. Ned found himself face to face with a wight that had once been a giant. The creature towered over him, blackened hands swinging a massive club. Only the combined efforts of half a dozen archers, setting it ablaze with pitch-soaked arrows, brought it down. Near dawn, the assault began to wane. The others withdrew into the swirling snow, leaving carnage behind. The ground before the gate was littered with bodies. Some moaned, still clinging to life. Most were dead. The wildlings outside who had not been slaughtered had scattered. Smoke rose in a pungent haze of death and burning flesh. Within Castle Black, men slumped in exhaustion, bloodied and numb. The first rays of pale light revealed the devastation. Countless wildlings who had made it inside were now orphans, widows, or missing limbs. The Black brothers had lost many, including some of Karstark's men. Rickard Karstark himself was wounded, an arm hanging uselessly at his side. Ned walked among the wounded, offering quiet words of comfort. A numbness spread through his soul. The largest force of the others was yet to come, he suspected. They had tested the wall, finding it not unguarded, but not impregnable either. At Ned's side, Jon shook with grief and anger, tears staining his cheeks. "There are so many dead," he whispered, voice raw. Ned placed a hand on his son's shoulder, not having the words to ease his pain. They stood among the ruins of what had once been a stalwart line between the realm and the terrors beyond. Yet they still lived. And where there was life, there was hope. In that moment of bitter dawn, the watchers on the wall realized that the war for the dawn had begun. Houses in the south squabbled over crowns while the true enemy gathered strength. But Ned Stark, once the honorable Lord of Winterfell, now a sworn brother of the Night's Watch, stood ready. He knew his duty. And with his son by his side, with wildlings and Northmen mustered behind him, he had given them a fighting chance. So in the bleak morning light, with the stench of death heavy in the air, they began to rebuild the defenses anew, for they had no other choice. Winter had come, and with it, the fate of all the living now hung upon their courage, and on the alliances they might yet forge to stand against the onrushing night. Dawn came like a feeble promise, illuminating the devastation outside Castle Black's ancient gates. Bodies lay strewn amid the churned, bloody snow. Scores of them, both wildlings and black brothers, had fallen in the frantic nighttime battle. Tendrils of smoke curled from mounds of fuel-soaked whites, still smoldering from the fire they had used to drive back the undead. A bitter wind hissed across the frozen ground, carrying the smell of death and searing it into every man's nostrils. Ned Stark stood on the walkway near the top of the wall, hand wrapped tight around the cold stone Merlon as he peered over the ramparts. He wore black plate beneath a fur cloak, his breath frosting in front of him. The vantage up here allowed him to see the wide field where so many had died mere hours ago, and his heart grew heavier with every second. Though the horde had retreated into the gloom before full daylight arrived, they were not gone. He felt their presence as keenly as the bite of the wind. Beyond the vast northern forest the others remained, marshalling their forces, or perhaps simply waiting. Ned could not guess at their motives. To the south, behind Castle Black's walls, wildlings and Night's Watch men alike limped among the wreckage, tending to the injured, burning the fallen before they could rise again. Somewhere below, Jon Snow was helping gather the wounded. Closing his eyes, Ned forced himself to breathe slowly. His limbs ached from hours of fighting and exhaustion draped him like a sodden cloak. But there would be no rest yet. The dawn gave them a few hours of respite, nothing more. When the sun sank, the dead would rise again, or else find another way to test the wall's defenses. He turned and made his way down the winding stair, each step jarring his bones. A few black brothers saluted him stiffly as he passed. Most were too weary or too traumatized to speak more than a grunt of acknowledgement. At the courtyard level, the destruction felt even harsher. Blood stained the snow everywhere, footprints and half-frozen pools turning the entire yard into a grim mosaic. Horses whickered anxiously from the stables, and the moans of the wounded formed a quiet, desperate chorus. The gates at the western perimeter, large iron-bound doors behind the main tunnel, had been reinforced by both Black Brothers and Karstark men, but no one felt certain that was enough. Even the great ranging of Jorah Mormont had not prepared them for an onslaught like this. Ned made his way to a hastily organized infirmary in one of Castle Black's larger halls. The structure was little more than a drafty chamber lined with pallets and cots, where Maester Aemon and a handful of volunteers moved from patient to patient, applying poultices and binding wounds as best they could. The old Maester, blind and frail, worked tirelessly with deft fingers. Even though he could not see, he sensed Ned's arrival and lifted his head. "Lord Stark," Maester Aemon said gently, his voice wavering with fatigue. "Or should I say Brother Ned?" He gave a wan, trembling smile, then let his attention return to the men in need. Ned bent over the nearest cot, where a young man lay with his eyes half-lidded, breath shallow. The boy wore the ringmail of a Karstark soldier. Though he clutched Ned's hand weakly, he could not speak. The edge of a linen bandage showed a deep splotch of red. Ned murmured words of encouragement, but he knew the lad might not survive the day. That knowledge weighed on him like a physical burden. He found Jon at the rear of the hall, standing among a cluster of Black Brothers. Jon's face was set in grim lines, the knuckles of his right hand bruised and cracked, no doubt from fighting whites at close quarters. Ghost, the albino direwolf, waited at Jon's side, pacing restlessly, ears flat with lingering unease. "How do we fare?" Ned asked, though he could see the answer in the men's tired eyes. Jon shook his head. "Many dead. Many more wounded. Lord Karstark was hurt but still commands his men. The wildlings lost almost as many, maybe more. Mance Raider's people are scattered around the yard burying their own. They're used to a harsh life, but this is beyond any story they ever told by the campfires." "No." A man behind Jon, Dolph, the wiry wildling scout who'd first brought word from beyond the wall, cleared his throat. "King Crow," he addressed Ned, meaning it as a kind of half-respectful, half-sardonic moniker. "Mance is asking for you." "Where is he?" Ned asked. "By the tunnel at the gate," Jon answered. "He wants to plan for tonight, or for whenever the dead come again." Ned nodded wearily and gestured for Jon to accompany him. Despite the gloom, he felt a ripple of solace at having his son by his side. They walked together out into the dim, wintry daylight. Dark clouds scudded across the sky, and a gentle fall of snow had begun, dusting the ground with a new white layer over the dark stains. Everywhere, men were toiling, removing bodies that would soon be fed to the flames. Some black brothers stoked great pyres, while wildling women huddled around smaller fires, whispering laments in the old tongue. The presence of so many free folk in Castle Black was an upheaval of centuries of tradition. Yet, in the face of a threat this colossal, no tradition could withstand the necessity of alliance. Mance Rayder stood on the wooden scaffolding near the inner gate, conferring with Tormund Giantsbane and a handful of his other lieutenants. Mance's once handsome face bore new scars, one running across his cheek, barely scabbed over. His eyes, though, were alight with iron resolve. When he saw Ned and Jon approach, he waved them up. "We lost 100 or more last night," Mance said without preamble. "They lost more. I saw them dragging away dozens of their own whites once we drove them back, as if they're saving them for another attack." His breath puffed in the frigid air. "I've never faced an enemy like this. We all know that. But we can't just stay behind the wall forever. The others are not going to relent." Tormund Giantsbane crossed his massive arms. "Our people are trapped out there, Mance. Thousands never made it through the gate before the dead came. If we don't find a way to rescue them, the others gain new corpses to add to their ranks." Jon tensed. "We tried to let them all in. You saw what happened. Once the whites came, we had no choice. If we'd opened the gate again, the others would have poured through with them." "No." Ned's voice was quiet. "We must try something else. Our best bet might be to coordinate a retreat to Eastwatch by the Sea or the Shadow Tower. Those castles are smaller, but they might be safer escape routes for wildlings still outside. We can hold every inch of the wall with so few men, but we could guide pockets of survivors to narrower choke points." Mance scratched at his beard, considering. "It's a risk, but doing nothing is worse." Before the conversation could go on, a sudden commotion near the center of the courtyard drew their attention. A small cluster of black brothers was dragging a ragged figure through the snow. The man's face was deathly pale, hair caked with frozen blood. One of his eyes was covered by a crude patch. He stumbled, collapsing, and the black brothers had to half carry him forward. Ned, Mance, and the others hurried down from the scaffolding to see what was happening. "Found him out beyond the tunnel," panted one of the watchmen, breath steaming. "He was crawling toward us, near senseless. Says he's from the Shadow Tower." The watchman looked uncertain. "He claims the others attacked there too." Ned's stomach twisted. He knelt beside the newcomer, who shuddered and coughed. Under the dirt and blood, the man's black cloak was torn to ribbons. "Brother," Ned said gently. They came," the man rasped, eyes wide with horror. "A host of them. The Shadow Tower tried to hold the gate. Sir Denys Mallister led us, but there were too many. So many whites." He let out a ragged sob. "I ran, Dottie. May the gods forgive me, I ran. They overran the place. Some tried to escape into the mountains, but they might be trapped too. I rode east, then lost my horse. Then I just kept going, hoping to warn someone. Nebois." With those final words, the man's head slumped and his body went limp. One of the watchmen pressed fingers to his neck and shook his head grimly. There would be no more details from him. No further hope. The men standing around, both wildlings and black brothers, exchanged bleak looks. Tormund spat onto the ground in anger. Jon's eyes flicked to Ned, stricken. Mance let out a slow breath. "They're moving along the entire length of the wall," Mance said. "Not just here, not just the Shadow Tower. They'll test every castle, every gate, all at once. The largest man-made structure in the world, built to guard against precisely this threat. And we don't have the numbers, or the means." A sense of terrible inevitability rolled through Ned. He had known in his heart that the others would not simply rest. They were pushing the living from every angle. They had the advantage of raising the dead as they went, bolstering their ranks with every victory. Even if the Night's Watch and the wildlings fought bravely, the enemy's numbers would grow while theirs dwindled. A realm's entire history felt poised on a knife's edge. Jon found his voice first. "We need reinforcements. Your mission south was supposed to bring more men, Father, but it may not be enough. Even if the Karstarks sent a few thousand, we're losing them faster than they arrive." Ned closed his eyes. He thought of Robb, camped in the Riverlands, locked in a bitter war with the Lannisters, the Tyrells, and whoever else might rise. Of all the great houses, only the North seemed to understand the gravity of this threat. And even then, many Northern bannermen were fixated on vengeance, or on the notion that King's Landing had to be taught a lesson. The others cared nothing for mortal conflicts. Their impetus was colder and older than any king's ambition. "We need the entire realm," Ned said softly. "Not just a few thousand men. We need the swords of the Reach, the Stormlanders, the Vale, Dorne, everyone. Or we'll be overrun. The war for the Dawn is not a figure of speech. It's upon us." Nadwan tried. Mance exchanged a weighted look with Tormund. "Then you'd better bring the realm to your cause, and fast. We can't hold out forever." "Agreed," said Ned. "We've sent ravens to every major seat, but, so far, the only real response has been from my son Robb, the king in the north. We'll have to try a more direct approach. Perhaps one of our ranking men must ride south again. Maybe more than one." Jon stared at Ned. "Father, you know you can't keep riding back and forth. The vow." Ned gripped his son's shoulder. "I serve the Watch now, Jon. And as part of that duty, I must do whatever is necessary to defend the realm. If that means once again facing the politics of the South, I shall do it. But let's not decide anything rashly. Let's regroup first, bury our dead. Mourn them. Tend to those who still cling to life. We'll speak again, come midday." Noiti. They parted with those words echoing in the cold air. Jon lingered behind a moment, gazing at the dead man from the Shadow Tower. Two black brothers gently lifted the body, bearing it away to the pyres. Jon's breath came slow and labored. He murmured something about duty, but Ned didn't quite catch it. Ghost whined softly at Jon's side, as if sensing his sorrow. By the time the midday sun, pale and wan, peeked through the gray clouds, the aftermath of the battle was more thoroughly assessed. The losses were staggering. Nearly 200 men had died in the single night of carnage, among them a large fraction of the Karstark contingent. The wildlings too had suffered, though they had no time or energy to tally an exact count. For every man or woman who perished, there was the risk of them rising again if not burned quickly. Smoke hung perpetually in the air, the smell clinging to garments, to hair, to the very stones of Castle Black. As Ned walked the ramparts that afternoon, he heard a horn blow once from the Eastern Watch. He tensed, fearing another wave of undead. But the cry that came was different. "Riders approaching!" the sentry shouted. Ned hastened to the gate, motioning for it to be unbarred just enough to see who came. A small band of horsemen emerged, a banner flapping above them, a gray direwolf on a white field. Karstarks. Or perhaps men from House Mormont. Ned's heart quickened. These were men from the north. A single black-cloaked watchman led them inside, and Ned recognized one of the riders, Sir Roderick Castle's nephew, a younger man named Tomard Castle, fresh-faced but solemn. "We bring men from Winterfell," Tomard announced, breath fogging as he spoke. "Some 2,000 foot, under the command of Wyman Manderley's second son, Wendell. More are behind us, but the roads are slow, my lord." He paused, swallowing. "My lord, I heard rumors you were leading the Watch now, but seeing you here is still a shock. We all thought you lost." Ned gave a grim smile. "I'm sworn to the Watch now, Tomard, but I remain a Stark of Winterfell in my heart. I'm glad you've come, though I fear it might not be enough. Have you heard more from Robb?" "We parted ways with his main host near the Twins. He said he'd do what he could to send more men north, but the fighting is fierce in the south. He sent me back to Winterfell to muster whatever forces were there. We brought these men to bolster the wall. Our lords know of the threat, at least. We're beginning to understand." Ned saw the shadow behind Tomard's eyes. The young man had witnessed something terrible on the road, no doubt. "Thank you," Ned said quietly. "Your arrival gives us a better chance. Make camp near the south courtyard. We'll find room, Speak with Bowen Marsh or Lord Karstark about the layout. The mention of Lord Karstark made Tomard's brows knit together. They say Lord Rickard was wounded? Ned nodded. He lives, but he's not fit for the field at present. We'll need leadership among these men. We need every capable commander for what's to come. A short while later, Ned convened another council, this time in the common hall. The day's meager light slanted through arrow-slit windows, illuminating the battered faces of those assembled. Jeor Mormont, still pale and slow to move after his own near-fatal injuries, sat at the head of the table. Ned stood beside him, while Jon hovered near the edge, half listening and half keeping watch on the corridor. Maester Aemon was there, as was Wendell Manderly, a broad-shouldered man in chainmail that strained around his girth, and a few of the surviving senior Black brothers. Mance Rayder and Tormund Giantsbane represented the free folk. Lord Rickard Karstark, despite his injuries, was carried in on a chair and set down near the hearth. Mormont lifted his voice first, ignoring his pain. We have learned the others are not content with small raids or random attacks. They strike at every weakness along the wall. The Shadow Tower is compromised, possibly lost. Eastwatch might be next, or might already be under siege. We do not know. Our ravens to Eastwatch receive no reply. Even if it still stands, they may be hard-pressed. Even if it still stands, they may be hard-pressed. Mance spoke up, arms crossed. You crows might be able to get a message through if the birds are still in their roost, but if Eastwatch is gone, we're on our own. Lord Karstark's voice came out in a hoarse rasp. We must unify the defense. Wendell, are you prepared to lead a relief force to Eastwatch by the sea? Wendell Manderly tugged at his beard, glancing from Ned to Mormont. I'm willing, yes. But how many can we spare to send east? The journey itself might be perilous. And if we divert men there, what if the others attack here again? We barely survived last night's assault. A tense hush followed. Every path seemed fraught with danger. Finally, Ned cleared his throat. We are forced into a difficult choice. We need to confirm the status of Eastwatch. If it still stands, we must bolster it. Because if the others hit us from both sides, Castle Black will be cut off. On the other hand, if we send too many men and the others attack here in greater force, we risk losing the center of the wall. A small scouting party might suffice, but that poses its own risks. Jeor Mormont murmured agreement. A scouting party to Eastwatch. If it still stands, the scouts can assess how dire the situation is. If it's lost, they can return or hurry to Castle Black with the news. We'll decide the next move once we know more. Tormund's booming voice rumbled in the gloom. And what of my people still trapped beyond the wall? They'll keep adding to the enemy's ranks if we don't move. We should muster every man with a strong sword arm and march out to rescue them. They're scattered, Mance said. But Tormund's right. There are pockets of free folk who might still be saved. I know it's not your duty to save wildlings, he added bitterly, but every body we lose is another that might become one of the undead. Ned recognized the urgent truth in Mance's words. While the large group had come to Castle Black, thousands more had been left outside when the attack began. They would be forced to hide in small enclaves, hopelessly outmatched. We'll form search parties, Ned said. Short forays beyond the wall, coordinated with watchers on the ramparts. We can't send everyone out, but small squads led by experienced rangers or wildling guides might bring pockets of survivors back through the gates. If it's too dangerous, they withdraw. Nay. Mance gave a slow nod. It may be enough to save some. That's all I can ask. Satisfied for the moment, the council turned to a final subject: how to rally the rest of the realm. They needed more than a trickle of northern men. They needed cavalry from the Reach, archers from Dorne, knights from the Vale, everyone. But the realm was in chaos, fracturing around claimants to the Iron Throne. Kings hammered each other in the Riverlands and the Stormlands. The crownsmen in King's Landing, led by the boy Joffrey, or truly by his mother Cersei, seemed to have no interest in halting the war to send men north. The letter Ned had previously sent would surely be mocked or dismissed. Lord Karstark's gaze flicked to Ned. Would your presence sway them if you rode south again? Ned felt the swirl of conflicting duties. He was sworn to the Night's Watch. By rights, he should remain at the wall, manning the defenses. Yet his name, and the myth of his honor, might still carry weight in the realm, if only to unify those who remembered the old rebellions and the times he had fought with Robert Baratheon. Possibly, Ned said slowly. But by leaving, I risk the vow I've taken. And that aside, would my presence in King's Landing do anything but provoke the Lannisters? I confessed treason once, under duress. They might see me as an enemy or an embarrassment best silenced. Jorah Mormont's brow creased. We can ill afford to lose you here. But the realm might heed your words more than those of anyone else in black. If we cannot obtain their assistance, we face a slow death, and the rest of Westeros will follow. Nyao. Jon, standing with arms folded, stared at his father. A swirl of contradictory emotions flitted across the young man's features, desire to keep Ned safely at the wall, fear for him, pride in the notion that only Ned might unite the great houses. But Jon spoke no objection. He knew well that their vow, though binding, was sometimes overshadowed by the greater good of protecting the living. Mormont pressed both hands on the table to steady himself. Eddard Stark, you are the most senior noble in the Watch, aside from perhaps a few others who cannot travel. If you are willing, I would name you my official envoy to the Lords of the Seven Kingdoms. We would need to confirm your safe passage, but I doubt there's any such thing in these times. Still, your name might open doors that ours will not. Ned looked around the room. Mance Rayder's keen stare, Tormund's frown, Karstark's grim nod, Wendell Manderley's half-hopeful shrug. All these people pinned their hopes on him in some way, but he knew the realm was not so simple. If that is your command, Lord Commander, Ned said quietly, then I will obey. Give me time to ready for the journey and to set our immediate defenses in order. Mormont sank back in his chair, relief mingling with resignation on his weathered face. So be it. Let us pray the Southern Lords have enough sense to set aside their petty wars, because if they do not, the dead will devour us all. That night, Ned walked along the battlements. The sky was black and starless, clouds smothering any moonlight. Below, he could see the silhouette of men on the ground, keeping watch. Torches lined the top of the wall at intervals, though their glow seemed feeble in the endless darkness. From time to time, he heard a distant moan or clank of ice, and he'd tense, expecting another attack. But the night passed quietly, as if the others were content to let the living simmer in dread. Perhaps they needed to gather more corpses, or perhaps they delighted in the psychological torment of leaving their foes in suspense. Shortly before midnight, Ned descended to the yard. He found Jon near the largest of the fire pits, where a few watchmen huddled for warmth. Ghost lay at Jon's feet, ears pricked toward the gates. Father and son exchanged a look. Without speaking, they stepped aside for a walk along the courtyard's perimeter. You're leaving, Jon said softly once they were alone in the lee of a wall. Aren't you? Ned nodded, the corners of his mouth tight. Lord Commander's orders. But I understand the need. The realm must be warned properly, and if I can help bring about some truce or alliance that sends men north, it might mean the difference between victory and annihilation. No. Jon's face flickered with conflicting feelings. I only just found you again. I thought we'd both be here, working side by side. He exhaled, a swirl of white mist in the cold air. But I also know we're short on choices. Ned laid a hand gently on Jon's shoulder. You are as strong and brave as any man I've known, Jon. I've seen it for myself, and so have your brothers in black. If I must go, then I know Castle Black stands in good hands. You will keep our men steady, calm, and loyal. And you will watch the wildlings with an even hand. They're our allies now, but alliances can shift under strain. Trust your instincts. Thanks. Jon gave a small, sad smile. I'll do my best. The wall is home to me now. Whether I like it or not, it is. But father, he hesitated. Can we truly unite the realm? I grew up hearing the old stories. Of the others, the Long Night, the Night's King. But I never truly believed them until I saw the Whites myself. How will you convince the lords in the South when they've never seen what we've seen? Not at all. Ned's gaze flicked to the horizon where the darkness pressed in. I'll have to find a way. Winter is coming, and for the first time in thousands of years, that's not just a promise of cold and snow. It may be our last chance. Jon bowed his head in solemn agreement. Then he hugged his father, a gesture made awkward by their layers of cloaks and armor. Ned returned the embrace, his heart twisting with fatherly pride and sorrow. The boy, no, the young man, had come so far. He was proud of Jon, proud to stand at his side. But now that time was cut short again. Duty demanded they part ways. At first light, Ned assembled a small party of black brothers willing to travel south. They chose 15 men with decent horses, enough to guard Ned from typical bandits, but not so large as to draw undue attention. Some Karstark and Manderly knights volunteered to ride with them too, swelling the group to nearly 30. Ned accepted, though he worried about how conspicuous they might be. With luck, the banner of the Night's Watch would grant them safe passage. In practice, any warlord or raiding party might ignore the taboo of harming black brothers in wartime. He bid farewell to Mormont, who pressed a ring into Ned's hand, an old silver band bearing the sigil of House Mormont. "Show this to my kin in the north if you need to prove my support," the Lord Commander said. "And if a southern lords won't listen to you, remind them that the great ranging nearly ended in disaster. Then show them your face. If they still want help, the gods may have turned from us altogether." Mance Rayder clasped Ned's forearm. "I never thought I'd see the day when the king beyond the wall asked a crow to beg the south for help. But here we are. Bring back an army, or we all die." Tormund thumped Ned on the back, nearly toppling him. "Good luck to you, Ned Stark," he said. "This winter's darker than any story I ever heard." Ned nodded. "Hold Castle Black as long as you can. If the realm answers, you won't fight alone." "Now why?" Finally Ned came to Jon, who wore a brave face but could not hide the anxious cast of his features. They gripped each other's arms in a warrior's farewell. "Keep your head down," Jon said. "Wear your cloak. Let them see you come as a sworn brother, not a rebellious lord." "I will," Ned promised. "Lead well, Jon. The men trust you." With that, Ned mounted his horse, an old courser named Ironfoot, and led the column out through the gates. The steel portcullis rose, scraping across the stone. The early morning chill stung his cheeks, and he dared not look back lest the sight of Castle Black and the newly raised encampments weigh too heavily on his mind. Within those walls, the last real bulwark against the others was preparing for a savage and unrelenting war. He prayed the old gods and the new might guide him south swiftly and bring him back with help. They traveled down the King's Road through the snowy expanse of the north, passing villages that seemed half empty. Many men had marched off to join Robb's war. Others had fled or died. Whispers of monstrous shapes in the night haunted every inn and holdfast. Some folk bowed to Ned, calling him Lord Stark, and he had to gently remind them he was no longer a lord. Still, their gratitude and fear were plain enough. Some pressed him for news. Was Winterfell safe? Was the wall about to collapse? Ned did what he could to reassure them, though he could offer little more than cautious hope. On the 10th day, they reached Winterfell. The gray walls and towers stood as Ned remembered, though the place felt subdued. The courtyard was not bustling with the usual activity. Fewer guards manned the ramparts. Of his family, only Bran and Rickon might still be here, though Ned feared for them. Robb had marched south, and rumors said that Theon Greyjoy was no longer an ally. Indeed, by now, Ned had heard troubling whispers about Ironborn raiders assaulting the stony shore. Could Theon have turned on the Starks? The idea twisted his heart, for Theon had been a ward of House Stark for years, almost like another son. Riding into Winterfell brought a flood of memories. The great oak gates welcomed him, and inside, Master-at-Arms Sir Rodrik Cassel was there, wearing black mourning cloth on his arm. He looked up, saw Ned, and froze in place. Tears sprang to the old knight's eyes. "My lord," he murmured. "Gods be praised you live." Ned dismounted, clasping Sir Roderick's weathered hand. "I live, for now. I serve the watch. Is my family here?" "Your lady wife remains with King Robb in the south," Sir Roderick answered. "But your sons Bran and Rickon are within the keep. They'll be overjoyed to see you." A pained look crossed his face. "They lost hope after word came that you'd been taken to the Black Cells." Ned nodded slowly. "I must see them. Then, Sir Roderick, we must talk of the wars and the threat beyond the wall. I've come for more than a family reunion." Sir Roderick bowed, tears glistening. "As you will, my lord. You'll find your sons in the Great Keep. They've not left Winterfell since Robb marched." Ned's steps were swift but hesitant as he made his way across the courtyard. He climbed the familiar stairs, feeling an ache of nostalgia in every step. 2 guards opened the doors to the main hall. The warmth of the hearth and the lingering smell of roasted meat greeted him. Then, a small shape hurtled across the floor. Rickon, his youngest, came rushing forward, eyes wide. He was bigger than Ned remembered, but still small for a boy. Rickon flung himself into Ned's arms, sobbing. Behind him, Hodor stood with a timid Bran perched on his broad shoulders. Bran's face was pale with disbelief. "Father?" Bran breathed. "Is it really?" Ned pulled Rickon close, tears threatening. "It's me," he whispered, looking up at Bran. "I'm home, for a little while." Hodor lowered Bran carefully so he could stand on his shaky legs with the help of a brace around his torso. The boy had been paralyzed from the waist down after his fall, but he still tried to maintain dignity. He pressed a hand against Hodor's shoulder for balance, then looked at Ned, tears brimming in his bright blue eyes. "Father, I thought." Ned set a gentle hand on Bran's cheek, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "I know. So much has happened and I can't stay. I serve the Night's Watch now. But I had to see you both, to know you were safe." "Nah." Bran bit his lip. "We're fine. Sir Roderick keeps us safe. But we miss Robb, we miss Mother, we miss you. What's going to happen?" "There's talk of dark creatures in the woods." Rickon clung to Ned's cloak, nearly choking him with the tightness of his grip. "Don't go away again, Father," the young boy pleaded, voice muffled. "Stay here. We need you. Shaggy Dog's always howling at night, and I have bad dreams." Ned's heart threatened to break. He knelt, holding both his boys. Hodor stood protectively near Bran, watching. "I wish I could stay," Ned said softly, tears in his eyes. "But there's a war greater than any we've known, and it's happening at the Wall. I have to try to bring help from the south to stop it, or there may not be a Winterfell left to protect." Bran lowered his gaze. "Then do what you must, Father. I'll protect Rickon until Robb returns." Ned kissed Rickon's head and squeezed Bran's hand, proud of how strong the boy had become despite his injury. "I know you will. You're both Starks, through and through." Normal. He spent that evening with them in the cozy warmth of Winterfell's solar, sharing what few tales he could that might be appropriate for children. He avoided the more harrowing details of the Whites, simply telling them that the Night's Watch guarded against terrible threats. Bran asked question after question, eyes flicking with fear and curiosity. Rickon kept his cheek pressed to Ned's arm, as if to convince himself his father was real. For a precious few hours, Ned felt almost like he was home again, the weight of duty briefly lifted. But the reprieve ended at dawn. Sir Roderick assembled the castle's stewards and petty officers in the Great Hall, where Ned explained in no uncertain terms the threat of the others. Gasps and murmurs spread among them, though many had already heard rumors. Ned requested that Winterfell dispatch any remaining fighting men who could be spared. The garrison was depleted, but they could at least provide a few hundred. Sir Roderick agreed, though he insisted they must keep enough to defend Winterfell itself, should the Ironborn or any other threat appear at their doorstep. "I understand," Ned said. "Do what you can. Every man helps." Before the midday meal, Ned convened a smaller meeting with Maester Luwin, a wise and gentle man who had taught all the Stark children. They pored over the ledgers to find if there were more men available in the surrounding area, whether they had enough arms and armor. Resources were slim. So many had marched with Robb. Still, Luwin promised to send ravens to the various northern houses, urging them to muster anew. Some might have men left behind to guard their keeps who could be rallied. "I'll ride out again before the week's end," Ned said. "I must continue south. My next aim is the Vale, my sister's homeland. If I can persuade Lysa Arryn to join us." Maester Luwin's expression turned guarded. "Lady Lysa has been cautious. Rumor says she keeps her gates shut, refusing to embroil herself or her son, the new lord of the Eerie, in any war. She may not listen." "I have to try," Ned replied. "The Vale could prove a formidable ally. The Knights of the Bloody Gate and the Eerie are worth a great deal in a fight. And if I can't persuade her, perhaps I can get an audience with some of the Vale Lords themselves." May. Once that was settled, Ned took the remainder of the day to walk the Godswood. The heart tree, with its pale bark and red leaves, whispered to him with ancient sorrow. He knelt before it, remembering the face of his father, remembering the proud lines of his brother Brandon, the kindness of his sister Lyanna. So many ghosts haunted this place. He prayed for guidance, for strength, for the safety of all his children scattered across the realm. Sansa possibly still in King's Landing. Arya lost somewhere unknown. Robb at war. Bran and Rickon right here but vulnerable. Winterfell was a place of memories but no longer a sanctuary from the storms of the world. When dusk fell, Ned gathered with Bran and Rickon for a final meal in the Great Hall. They dined on hot bread, hearty stew and spiced wine that warded off the chill. Bran spoke quietly of the ravens he'd seen flying in the sky, and asked if perhaps they carried tidings of Robb. Rickon said little, just watched Ned with solemn eyes. After supper, Ned guided them both to their chambers, tucking Rickon into bed like he once had years ago. The boy's small arms clutched his father's hand, not wanting to let go until sleep overcame him. In the corridor, Ned turned to Bran, who sat in a wheeled chair that Hodor pushed gently. "I must go at first light," Ned said, voice low. Bran nodded, eyes brimming. "Bring help, father. Bring it soon." Ned stroked Bran's hair. "I will, my boy." At dawn, Ned departed Winterfell with his escort, leaving behind another portion of men who would gather and prepare to march north at Sir Roderick's direction. He couldn't help but look back at the ramparts once. Bran's small silhouette sat on the walkway in his chair, with Hodor behind him. Rickon stood to the side, leaning out to wave. Ned lifted a hand in farewell, the ache in his heart almost unbearable. They rode east, then south, aiming to reach the Vale by the high passes. The route would take them near the mountains that separated the north from the Vale of Arryn. A rugged journey at the best of times, doubly so in winter. The roads were often treacherous, and rumors of mountain clans prowling the high passes persisted. But a direct route to the Vale might be faster than attempting to navigate the war-torn riverlands, where Lannister and Stark forces skirmished daily. Ned needed speed, secrecy, and luck. For the first leg of the trip, the weather held calm. The sky was a pale gray that threatened snow but did not deliver. The company made decent progress, crossing old stone bridges and winding through pine forests. Each night they made camp off the road, setting watches in a ring around Ned's tent. The men respected Ned's station, though they also knew he was no longer a lord. Still, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a Stark. On the 5th day, snow began to fall in earnest, forcing them to slow. The passes ahead would be slick with ice. One of the Karstark knights, a man named Hallis, approached Ned with a worried frown. "Snow's thick, my lord. Pardon, brother Stark. Could be dangerous to press on." "Nah." Ned surveyed the swirling flakes. "We'll find shelter tonight. See how it looks in the morning. Time is too precious to wait out a minor flurry, but we cannot afford to lose half our horses in a blizzard either." They made camp beneath a sheltering cliff face, building a large fire. The night was cold and miserable. Wolves howled in the distance, and the men huddled close to the flames, sharing stories to distract from their discomfort. Ned stared at the dancing embers and thought of the White's cold blue eyes. He wondered if, at that very moment, Jon and Mance were fighting another wave at Castle Black, or if Eastwatch had already fallen. The realm had no notion that its future was being decided on an icy battlefield far to the north. Morning dawned with a clearer sky, so they pressed on. The narrow path wound upward through the foothills, with steep drops on one side. Hooves clattered on rock. They encountered only an abandoned camp or two, perhaps left by mountain folk. Twice they saw shapes moving in the distance, small, hunched figures that vanished behind crags. Mountain clans, no doubt. But the Watchers did not attempt an ambush. Perhaps the sight of 30 armed riders gave them pause. After a week of slow travel, they descended into a lower valley that formed part of the Vale's northern border. Here, the weather was marginally milder. Patches of grass still showed through the thin snow, and they saw an occasional farmstead. Ned felt a flood of relief. The Vale was not as stricken by winter's wrath as the far north. That might mean the roads to the Eerie were still navigable. Yet another hurdle awaited: Lysa Arryn's rumored isolationism. Ever since her husband Jon Arryn died, she had retreated into the Eerie with her young son Robert. She had spurned calls for alliances or open warfare, refusing to commit the Vale's knights to any side. Would she even grant Ned an audience? They arrived at the gates of the Bloody Gate, the stone fortress that guarded the single pass into the Vale's interior. Archers on the ramparts watched them approach. Ned's men raised the banner of the Night's Watch high, hoping for a diplomatic reception. A knight wearing the sigil of House Royce came out to parley. "Halt! Who comes?" called the knight. "State your business in the Vale." Ned stepped forward. "I am Eddard Stark, sworn brother of the Night's Watch. I come seeking an audience with Lady Lysa Arryn. Our realm is in dire peril." The knight's eyes widened slightly. Perhaps he'd heard the tale of Ned Stark's fall from grace. Still, he bowed. "We have orders that the Vale remains closed to outsiders. But you are kin to the Lady Lysa's late husband, and your name carries weight. Wait here while we send a messenger. You may shelter by the outbuildings but do not advance beyond the gate." "Now Nantal." Ned nodded, resigned. That was more courtesy than he might have expected, given the circumstances. He guided his men to a small stable area on the Vale side of the fortress' first wall. They set up a temporary camp, well within sight of the gate's guards. The next day stretched long and tedious. Archers on the walls kept close watch, but there was no hostility so long as Ned's party made no move. The messenger evidently had quite a distance to travel, up winding roads to the Eerie perched high among the peaks. Night fell, then dawn, then midday again, and still no response. Some of Ned's escorts grumbled at the delay. They were used to the harsh directness of the north, where a lord either accepted or refused you within an hour, not days. But the Vale had always been more cautious, some would say timid, and Lysa Arryn was known for excessive protectiveness of her son. It was late in the afternoon of the second day when a small column of Vale knights appeared from beyond the Bloody Gate, trotting across the narrow pass. At their head was Sir Brynden Tully, called the Blackfish, Catelyn's uncle and Lysa's uncle as well. Ned recognized him immediately and felt a surge of relief. The Blackfish reined in his horse a few yards from Ned's own. A grim smile quirked his lips. "Ned Stark, I suspected I might find you here once I heard the rumors. Lady Lysa has been in turmoil ever since word came that you survived King Joffrey's sentencing." Ned offered a measured bow. "Sir Brynden, it's good to see you alive. I come on urgent business for the realm. The others have returned in force. The Night's Watch is overrun and needs every able blade." "Nana house there." Brynden studied Ned's face intently. "I believe you." He lifted a hand to stall any further explanation. "I served as a Knight of the Gate for many years. I've heard the rumors, the ravens. There's talk of whites in the north. But Lysa, she's taken an isolationist stance. She believes the Vale is safest if we close our borders and watch the rest of Westeros tear itself apart." Ned frowned. Surely once she hears the truth, she'll understand that the threat from the north will soon become a threat to the Vale as well. The Blackfish's eyes flickered with sympathy. "I'll do what I can, but Lady Lysa is unpredictable. Still, she has agreed to see you, on condition that you travel with only a small retinue. The rest must remain here. The Eerie is not prepared to host a large party, or so she says." Ned glanced at his men, who exchanged uncertain looks. He finally inclined his head. "Very well. I'll bring a few men for personal protection only." Brynden nodded. "Then let us ride. The path to the Eerie is narrow. You'll go on mules part of the way, or on foot if need be, but we must leave soon if we want to reach the Gates of the Moon before nightfall." Ned entrusted the bulk of his escort to one of the Karstark knights, instructing them to maintain discipline and avoid any provocation. Then he selected 3 men to accompany him: a seasoned black brother named Tom Wick, a Karstark archer named Laramie, and a taciturn Manderly knight known as Sir Brax. Brynden Tully led them through the Bloody Gate, passing under portcullises and along switchback roads that climbed higher into the mountains. That evening, they reached the Gates of the Moon, a lower castle at the foot of the Giant's Lance, where the Eerie perched. Brynden arranged for them to spend the night in modest quarters. The next morning, they began the harrowing climb up the mountain trails that led to the Eerie itself. Mules carried them along paths so narrow that a single misplaced step would send them plummeting into the clouds. The wind whipped at Ned's cloak, and the chill air was sharper even than the north's in some ways. Snow dusted the rocky crags, shining under the pale sunlight. By midday, they beheld the Eerie clinging to the mountainside, towers of pale stone rising into the sky. The castle looked both beautiful and forbidding. a fortress in the heavens. Servants greeted them with polite but cool courtesy, leading them up steep staircases into the airy halls. The entire place felt half empty, as if the majority of its inhabitants had been dismissed or had fled. The sound of their footsteps echoed. Finally, they entered the high hall, where Lady Lysa Arryn sat with her son, Robert, in a carved wooden seat. Robert, a sickly boy, clung to his mother's side, wide-eyed and pale. Lysa herself had changed greatly since Ned last saw her. She wore a lavish gown of blue silk trimmed with falcon feathers, her hair coiled high upon her head. But her face seemed pinched, and her eyes had a nervous glint. When she saw Ned, her lips pressed together as if she had tasted something sour. "Lord Eddard Stark," she said formally, though she made no move to rise. "Or should I say, ex-Lord Stark of the Night's Watch? I have heard all manner of tales." Ned bowed. "Lady Lysa, indeed I serve the watch now. I come to you not to speak of personal glory or power, but of the threat that faces us all. The others have returned in force, bringing an army of whites. They attack the wall at multiple points. Castle Black, Eastwatch, the Shadow Tower. None are safe. Soon, they may move south." She pursed her lips, glancing at her son. Robert curled closer to her, burying his face in her arm. "How dreadful," Lysa said, voice light with forced sympathy. "But the Vale is secure behind its mountains. We do not need to entangle ourselves in the wars of the Iron Throne or any other wars. We have enough food, strong knights, and we can close the passes until winter ends." Ned felt a surge of frustration. "My lady, these are not bandits or warring lords. These are the dead, who do not feel cold or hunger, who kill relentlessly and add their victims to their ranks. No mountain pass will remain safe if they come at you in full force." She lifted her chin haughtily. "Then they will freeze in the snows, or shatter on our peaks. The Vale is inviolate. My beloved Lord John always said the Eerie could never be taken by force." Brynden Tully, standing near a pillar, cleared his throat. "Lysa, you know John never anticipated a foe like this. He was a man of the realm, caring for all 7 kingdoms. If he were here now, do you think he would counsel turning a blind eye to the suffering of so many? To the threat that could consume our own neighbors?" Lysa's gaze narrowed. "I care for my son's safety above all. The realm turned its back on me when I needed it most. Why should I rush to help them now?" A cold knot formed in Ned's stomach. "Because if the realm falls to the darkness beyond the wall, no corner will be truly safe, not even the Eerie. The others bring winter with them. You may hold out longer than some, but eventually supplies will dwindle, roads will vanish under snow and ice, and the dead will come scratching at your gates. My lady, the Night's Watch begs your aid not out of convenience, but out of desperation. Knights of the Vale are among the finest in West." Her lips trembled with indecision. Robert whined softly, burying his face in her gown. She patted his head, then turned an exasperated look upon Ned. "What exactly do you propose, brother-in-law? That I send my entire host north to freeze, fighting walking corpses in some savage land? That I risk my precious child? What if I do, and the Lannisters sweep in and claim the Vale in our absence?" Ned drew a measured breath, pushing aside anger. "I do not ask that you leave the Vale defenseless, but commit at least part of your knights to the cause. Let them join with my son Rob's forces or march directly to the wall, where they'll be under the command of the Night's Watch. You can keep a strong garrison here in the Vale to protect yourself and your son. No one is forcing you to expose the Vale entirely." She opened her mouth to respond, but Sir Brynden interjected softly. "Lysa, you know in your heart that this is the right course. The realm is bigger than just our seat. John Arryn believed in unity. If you will not do it for the rest of Westeros, do it for the memory of your husband." Lysa's face twisted with conflicting emotions. She looked away, staring at the tall windows where a breeze fluttered the drapes. Silence stretched. Ned glanced at the dais behind them, where the famous moon door led to a sheer drop thousands of feet below. He recalled that Lysa had once threatened to toss Tyrion Lannister through that door on lesser charges. She could be vicious, unpredictable. Finally, she spoke in a clipped tone. "Very well. I will send an envoy to our leading bannermen, the Royces, the Redforts, the hunters, and the Belmores. I will ask them to muster a force that might travel north. But I will not lead it myself, nor will I strip the Vale's walls bare for the sake of a cause that may be. She paused, catching herself. That may be dire, but not all of us are sure. The knights who go will do so as volunteers under the watchful eye of Lord Royce, or whomever they choose. That is all I can promise. Ned exhaled slowly, relief and disappointment mingling. It was a compromise. Perhaps not the wave of support he had dreamed of, but at least a foothold in the Vale. Even a few thousand knights could shift the balance when the others came in force. Thank you, Lady Lysa, he said, bowing. You will be remembered for this decision. She only nodded, turning to whisper something to her son. Robert peeked out, curiosity mingled with wariness on his pale face. He was no more than 8, but with the illnesses that plagued him, he seemed even younger. Ned felt a pang of pity. If the others marched unchecked, children like Robert wouldn't stand a chance. Sir Brynden politely ushered Ned out of the high hall. That went better than I'd feared, the Blackfish said once they were in the corridor. But you must be swift. Lysa might change her mind if fear seizes her again. There aren't any Hawkeye. Ned clasped Bryndon's hand. Thank you, Uncle. My next step is to see if I can speak with some of the Vale Lords directly. Encourage them to join quickly. Then I ride south. To where? Ned's face grew grim. King's Landing, or near enough. Someone must attempt to reason with the Iron Throne. Joffrey may not listen, but perhaps there are others in power who see reason. Failing that, I might go to the Reach. It is the most populous region, and if the Tyrells can be swayed, they could muster a vast host in little time. Nai. The Blackfish looked uneasy. The roads are dangerous. War rages across the Riverlands, and the Gold Cloaks or Lannister outriders might try to take you. You're still officially attainted as a traitor? Ned allowed himself a faint smile. I'm not so sure Joffrey's decree holds now that I've taken the Black. Technically, I have no claims to any land or title. We shall see if they honor the ancient traditions. If not, well, I've faced Lannisters before. Yes, you're right. They parted ways with an embrace. Sir Brynden offered to accompany Ned for part of his journey, but Ned declined. Brynden was needed here, to ensure Lysa's promise bore fruit. Meanwhile, Ned would press onward, like a messenger bearing ill news from one corner of the realm to the next. The next days passed in a whirlwind. Ned conferred with several Vale Lords who had arrived at the Eerie or at the Gates of the Moon, explaining the threat and urging them to muster men. Some responded with alarm, others with skepticism. A few might have believed Ned was weaving tall tales to manipulate them. Yet his calm, somber demeanor, and the presence of the Blackfish backing him, convinced enough that they agreed to send knights north to bolster the wall. By the time Ned departed the Vale, an initial force of 500 knights and men-at-arms was set to ride for Castle Black within a fortnight, with more hopefully to follow. Though it was less than he'd hoped, it was also more than he'd dared to dream. If those 500 spurred others to follow, the Vale might yet stand among the defenders of the realm. Ned prayed that the avalanche of support would continue. On the road south, Ned and his small escort traveled cautiously. The world felt darker with each passing league. Stories from travelers painted a grim picture. The Lannisters had burnt crops in the Riverlands, fighting the Tully Bannermen. Robb Stark had won another victory at Oxcross, but the war was far from over. Stannis Baratheon and Renly Baratheon were both dead, so the rumors claimed, leaving a trail of chaos among their followers. Meanwhile, King's Landing was said to be near famine, the people restless. None of these petty struggles meant anything compared to the horror looming in the north, yet each new conflict drained the realm of able-bodied men who might have fought the true enemy. Crossing into the Riverlands, Ned's party took back roads to avoid major troop movements. They stayed off the main highways as best they could. Even so, they occasionally spotted columns of soldiers, either Stark men or Lannister outriders. When the Watchers glimpsed a large force, they took cover in thickets, letting the danger pass. They could not afford to be captured or forced into a battle that had nothing to do with their mission. On the 13th day of their ride south, they crested a hill overlooking a small river. Beyond the bridge, black smoke curled from what had once been a village. Charred timbers and broken fences lay scattered. Crows circled overhead, croaking hungrily. No living soul stirred below. Ned reined in Ironfoot, heart heavy. War, he murmured to the men around him. This is what it brings. Ash and death. He thought of the undead, who would bring a far worse destruction if not halted. Would the entire realm look like this if the others advanced? They continued, forging through a muddy lane. The stench of burned flesh lingered among the ruined huts. A few battered corpses lay by the roadside. Ned dismounted to check if any breathed. None did. He motioned for his men to bury the bodies or burn them, whichever was more merciful, but they had neither time nor resources. They could only say a brief prayer. Then, onward. Late the next day, they reached a cluster of ragtag tents near a bend in the Trident, where a group of wounded soldiers was camped. Most wore the banner of House Mallister or House Bracken. Ned approached cautiously, cloak pulled tight, the black color of the watch plain. A man with an arm in a sling stared dully at them, but made no move to threaten. Greetings, Ned said softly. We seek passage. Is there a crossing near here that is safe from the fighting? The wounded man shrugged. Safe? No place is safe in the Riverlands. But there's a shallow ford 3 leagues east. You can ride around the worst of the fighting if you cut south after that. Ned was about to thank him when another voice croaked from behind a tattered tent. Is that Ned Stark? The speaker limped into view, Rob's uncle, Edmure Tully. His once proud stance was marred by a bandaged leg, and exhaustion lined his face. He stared in disbelief. I'd heard rumors, but... Ned moved forward, helping Edmure stand when he faltered. Edmure, what's happened? Are you badly hurt? Edmure grimaced. Took an arrow in the calf. We had a skirmish near Harrenhal. My men tried to hold a crossing, but the Lannisters were too many. We retreated here, licking our wounds. His eyes flicked over Ned's black garb. So you truly wear the black now? Yes, Ned said simply. But my mission is to gather aid for the war that matters, the war against the others. Castle Black is under siege. The entire wall may fall. Edmure's eyes widened. Sevens save us. I'd heard wild rumors from ravens, but with the fighting here, we hardly know what to believe. Is it truly that dire? It's worse, Ned said. Every day we delay, the others grow stronger. I've managed to sway some from the Vale to send help. I pray the Riverlands will do the same. I know you're in the midst of war, but if the undead break through, it won't matter who sits on the Iron Throne. Nananes. Edmure looked torn, anger warring with fear. I can't speak for Rob. He's our king now, but I am still Lord of Riverrun in his absence, though my sister Caitlin also has authority. Perhaps we can muster what remains of our forces. A flicker of hope stirred in Ned. I need to speak with you or with Rob. Let him know that the threat is far worse than any Lannister plot. The War of 5 Kings must end, or at least pause. We need unity. Nine. You speak sense, Edmure admitted, but reason is scarce in these times. Rob's in the west last I heard, trying to push the Lannisters back. If you head that way, you'll be riding into contested lands. But I can send a rider to Riverrun, let them know to expect you. My father, Hoster Tully, is too ill to make decisions, so it falls to me and my sister to handle matters. Ned placed a comforting hand on Edmure's shoulder. I'm sorry about your father's illness. I'll do all I can to help, but I must reach as many major lords as possible. If you or your bannermen can spare men for the north, we'd be in your debt. Now, Edmure gave a weary nod. Let me rest, then I'll write a letter for you, sealed with the Tully crest. Show it to our lords. It may help you pass unmolested. So Ned and his men lingered for a day among the wounded. They shared what supplies they could. Sir Brax helped set up makeshift shelters, while the Karstark archer, Laramie, hunted small game in the surrounding woods to bolster the camp's meager rations. Ned conferred with Edmure about the complexities of the war. The Tully heir was overwhelmed, trying to defend the Riverlands from constant Lannister raids, while also supporting Rob's broader strategy. Edmure agreed that the others posed a threat beyond imagining, but he worried he had little left to give. Our men are scattered, exhausted, half-starved in some cases, he confessed. If we can bring this war to a quick end, we might reform our ranks. But right now, every spear is needed to hold the Lannisters back. Ned could only offer quiet sympathy. He urged Edmure to keep pressing Robb for a truce or an armistice, anything that might free men to go north. Edmure promised to try. By the time Ned departed the next morning, the letter in his saddlebag, he felt both grateful and disheartened. Grateful that Edmure understood, but disheartened at how entangled everything was. The realm was devouring itself, leaving the real threat unchallenged. With the Tully letter in hand, Ned angled southward to avoid the heaviest fighting. They slipped through lesser-known trails, crossing farmland ravaged by the war. Farmsteads were empty or burned. A few battered peasants emerged from hiding to beg for bread. Ned gave what he could spare, but it was never enough. The men in black cloaks, once revered protectors, could only move on, shadows of hope in a land drowning in despair. Eventually, they rejoined the main road leading toward the Crownlands. Scouts warned that Lannister patrols were rife in the area. Tywin Lannister allegedly had forces near Harrenhal, while the Tyrells and the Crown's own Goldcloaks might roam the roads as well. Approaching King's Landing directly seemed a gamble. Ned could be recognized. Would Cersei arrest him, ignoring the sanctity of the Watch? Possibly. But if he truly hoped for peace, he needed to speak with those in power, and King's Landing was the center of it all, for good or ill. Before venturing too close, Ned paused in a small orchard near a fork in the road. The capital was perhaps 2 days away. The day was bright, but the cold wind reminded him of the creeping winter. He dismounted and gathered his men. "We've come this far," he told them. "But I must decide. Do we ride openly into King's Landing, or do we attempt a more discreet approach? If Cersei or Joffrey sees me as a threat, they could throw me in a cell, or worse." "What do you say?" Tom Wick, the Black brother, shrugged. "We have the laws of the Watch on our side. You took the Black. They can't legally execute or imprison you for your past, but these are Lannisters, and they have many ways to twist the law." Sir Brax added, "Perhaps we can seek out someone sympathetic first. Someone on the small council, maybe, if such a person remains." Ned grimaced, thinking of those who once sat on Robert's council: Renly, Littlefinger, Pycelle, Varys. Renly was dead, or so the rumors said. Pycelle was a Lannister creature. Varys was cunning, but unpredictable. Littlefinger. Ned trusted him not at all. There was only one possibility. Tyrion Lannister, the imp, had once shown some semblance of reason. But could Ned trust him now? And was he even in King's Landing? Another option came to him suddenly: the City Watch. If any part of the city might remain neutral, it could be them, though experience taught him otherwise. They had helped the Lannisters seize power, but some knights might still hold the vow to protect the realm above all else. It was a slim hope. At length, Ned said, "We'll ride in openly, but we'll keep our swords close. We proclaim ourselves as Night's Watch brothers come to seek an audience with the king regarding the threat beyond the wall. If they refuse us or try to imprison us, then the realm is truly lost." His men agreed in muted tones. They set off for the city the next morning, hearts pounding with both anticipation and dread. The approach to King's Landing was marked by a steady increase in traffic: vendors, refugees, soldiers. The air smelled of sweat, waste, and desperation. The war had pushed peasants from the Riverlands and the Reach into the capital, seeking safety they likely would not find. Houses sagged under the weight of too many people. The walls loomed ahead, banners of the crowned stag and lion still rippling on the turrets. Once, it had been Robert Baratheon's seat, but now the Lannisters held sway in all but name. At the city gates, a pair of gold cloaks halted them. Their eyes flicked over Ned's black cloak and the small retinue behind him. "Night's Watch, is it?" one guard asked suspiciously. "Yes," Ned replied. "We come on official business, to speak with the king about urgent matters of the realm." The other guard squinted. "You look familiar." Ned inclined his head. "I am Eddard Stark. I took the Black by royal decree, spared from execution on false charges of treason." The guards exchanged uneasy glances. One licked his lips. "Wait here." He motioned for a runner to fetch a superior. The tension was palpable as the men in black sat astride their horses, passers-by gawking at them. Finally, a captain of the Goldcloaks arrived, a hard-eyed man with a bushy mustache. He studied Ned with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Eddard Stark," he said flatly. "I never expected to see you here again." Ned bowed stiffly. Yet here I am by necessity. We have urgent news for King Joffrey, news that concerns the entire realm. Will you let us pass, or must we camp at your gate?" The captain hesitated, likely recalling that Ned's execution had been stayed by the king's mother. "The king ordered your banishment to the Night's Watch. You are black, so I suppose you are no longer in violation of the crown's justice. Very well. But we'll escort you to the Red Keep under guard. Hand over your weapons until an audience is arranged." "Already, by Jebora." Ned grimaced inwardly. "We cannot surrender our swords. The law of the Watch allows us to carry arms, even in the presence of the king, unless he decrees otherwise. But if you must keep them in your custody for the moment, do us no harm." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Fine. My men will escort you. You'll keep the swords, but no sudden moves. If you cause trouble, you'll be cut down." Thus, Ned and his retinue entered the city flanked by a small troop of gold cloaks. The streets were crowded and filthy, worse than Ned remembered. Haggard faces peered from alleyways. Sickly children begged for scraps. Tensions simmered, and once or twice, roving bands of young toughs eyed them with hostility. The war had clearly taken its toll here, too. Rumors of bread riots and cruelty by the Lannisters had spread to every corner. They wound their way up Aegon's high hill to the Red Keep. The castle's crimson stone walls rose ominously in the dull midday light. Upon entering, they were led across a courtyard to a guarded antechamber. The captain barked orders for Ned and his men to wait there while he sought instructions from the higher-ups. Armed guards lined the walls, watching them. The place felt suffocating, though the large windows let in a faint sea breeze. They waited for what felt like hours. Eventually, a familiar figure glided in, Lord Varys, the master of whisperers, wearing voluminous robes and a fixed, polite smile. He regarded Ned with a tilt of his head as if studying a rare animal. "Lord Stark, oh forgive me, you prefer Brother Ned now. I must say, this is quite the surprise." Ned's lips tightened. "Varys, you're still here, I see, and presumably still in the service of King Joffrey?" Varys put a delicate hand to his chest. "I serve the realm, good sir, as always. And these days that means I must be most accommodating to the king's desires. But I have some influence still. May I ask what brings you here, risking your life yet again?" "The others have returned," Ned stated bluntly. "Castle Black is under siege. We need an alliance of all the great houses to drive them back. I've come to plead our case before the king." A flicker of genuine concern passed over Varys' face. "I've heard rumors. Gruesome rumors. You mean to say it's all true?" "It is," Ned said tightly. "And worse than you can imagine. The wall may fall if we don't muster an army. Now, will I be granted audience or not?" Varys let out a small sigh. "It will be tricky. Queen Cersei holds the reins of power more than ever, and the king, well, he's prone to fits of cruelty, as you know. But let me see what I can arrange. You have my word that I'll try to keep your head attached to your shoulders." He glided off as suddenly as he arrived. Another hour of tense waiting followed. Ned's men shifted uneasily, eyeing the guards. Finally, a herald appeared, leading them through the corridors into the throne room. The space was as vast and imposing as Ned remembered, with high columns and walls of stone. At the far end, the Iron Throne loomed, twisted swords forming a jagged seat. Joffrey Baratheon, or Joffrey Lannister in truth, sat upon it, a sneer on his youthful face. He wore crimson and gold, a golden crown resting upon his blonde curls. Beside him stood Cersei Lannister, dressed in rich black silk embroidered with lion motifs. The Kingsguard loomed in white armor, Sir Meryn Trant, Sir Boros Blount, and others. Littlefinger stood off to one side, his eyes flicking over Ned's party with thinly veiled amusement. And near the dais, just behind the king, stood Sandor Clegane, the Hound, face twisted in a perpetual scowl. As Ned and his men stepped forward, the gold cloaks lining the hall smacked their spears on the floor. The clang reverberated. Joffrey leaned forward on the throne, licking his lips. "Well, well," he said, voice echoing in the chamber. "My mother told me you might come crawling back, Stark." Ned forced himself to remain calm. "I have come not for myself, but for the realm. I wear the black, as your decree demanded. Now, I beg you to hear me." Joffrey's face twisted with mock pity. "Beg then." Cersei placed a hand on Joffrey's arm as if cautioning him. Her green eyes studied Ned coldly. You come with tales of ice demons and walking corpses, do you not, Lord Stark? Or should I call you the Crow? Call me what you will, Ned said, voice steady. The truth is the same. The wall is under attack. The Night's Watch is outnumbered. If the wall falls, the entire kingdom will be overrun. We ask for men, supplies, and support. This threat is real. A hush stretched in the throne room. Some courtiers exchanged glances, uncertain and afraid. Others stifled snickers, as if it were all a farce. Cersei let the silence linger. Then she said in a measured tone, "The crown is engaged in war, Stark. Our resources are stretched thin. Why should we divert them to chase children's stories?" Ned's temper smoldered, but he held it in check. "Because if you do not, your war will be meaningless when the dead march through these halls. I have faced them. Good men of the Night's Watch have died, only to rise again. My own son, Jon Snow, has fought them." Cersei's lips curved into a faint, icy smile. "You speak as though you expect me to take the word of traitors, or do you forget your confession of treason against the crown?" Joffrey's voice rose. "He admitted he tried to steal my throne. He wanted me dead." Ned clenched his jaw. "I confessed only to save my daughter Sansa's life." A flicker of something crossed Cersei's expression, maybe guilt, maybe memory. She quickly banished it. "Where is our dear Sansa now?" she asked sweetly. "She was once betrothed to the king." Ned's heart panged. He had no idea where Sansa was, though last he knew she'd been kept in the Red Keep. She was not visible in the throne room now. "I do not know," he said softly. "If she remains here, then I pray you keep her safe." Littlefinger coughed delicately. "Your Grace, the man is desperate. Perhaps we should hear him out more thoroughly. The realm stands to gain little by ignoring him, if indeed these rumors hold any truth." "Nice." Joffrey scowled, turning on Littlefinger. "I don't recall asking your opinion, Lord Pettier." Cersei, stepping in quickly, said, "One of the tasks of our council is to advise my son." Turning back to Ned, she spoke in a tone of exaggerated patience. "Let us suppose for a moment that we believed you, that the others are real, and that the Night's Watch is in danger. We are still at war with the so-called king in the north, your son, Robb. Why would we send troops north to aid the very man who rebels against us?" Now Ned drew a breath. "Because this foe threatens all of us, regardless of who sits the Iron Throne. Even if you crush Robb in battle, the dead will still come. They will not kneel to you or anyone else. They will only kill." Joffrey smirked. "I have every confidence that my armies can handle whatever northern phantoms you conjure. Besides, if your son is so worried, he can yield and bend the knee. Then perhaps we might consider sending men to the wall." Ned expected that. He kept his expression neutral. "Then you would ignore the threat out of petty vengeance? That is how you doom the realm. I humbly suggest a truce, a cessation of hostilities, so that we might unite. Once the others are dealt with, the politics of the throne can resume." The hush grew taut. Then Joffrey burst out laughing, an unpleasant, shrill sound. "A truce? With a rebel who calls himself a king? You overreach, Stark. You have no right to ask favors of me." Cersei's hand tightened on the arm of the throne. "Enough, Joffrey," she said in a low tone. "We can make use of this. If the North begs for peace, they'll have to pay a price." Ned could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, but he pressed on. "Let the price be survival, Your Grace. Life for the entire kingdom. My son Robb is a pragmatic man. He knows the threat we face. If you offer a real cessation of violence and send men to the wall, he will respond." Joffrey lounged back, toying with one of the swords that jutted from the Iron Throne's arm. "I'm bored with this. Mother, do as you please. But if the wolf pup refuses to kneel, we're done talking." "Now, Renan?" Cersei inclined her head to Joffrey, then turned her gaze upon Ned. "Very well. We will send a raven north, offering a pause in the war, on condition that Robb Stark meets with our envoys and pledges fealty to the crown. Only then will we dispatch men to support the Night's Watch. That is our final offer." Ned's heart pounded. It was the best he might get from them. But Robb would never bend the knee to Joffrey after everything that had happened. The injustice, the broken betrothal, the decapitation threat to Ned himself. Still, if the alternative was the entire realm consumed, would Robb see sense? Or would pride consume them all? He bowed stiffly. I will carry your terms to Robb if I can find him on the field. But the threat does not wait. The others will continue their advance whether your envoys parley or not. You might do well to gather your forces now. Time is short. Joffrey sneered. Get him out of my sight. He reeks of black rags and northern cowardice. The Goldcloaks banged their spears. Ned, fists clenched at his sides, turned on his heel and strode from the throne room, his men following. Littlefinger's faint smile seemed to dance at the corners of Ned's vision. Varys' face was unreadable. Outside, the Red Keep's courtyard swarmed with guards. Ned's retinue recovered their horses, though they noticed the stable hands had gone through their saddlebags. Ned remounted, feeling cold dread. He had the faintest promise of an offer that required Robb's surrender. That was no alliance, no unity. Merely the Lannisters' attempt to subjugate the North once and for all. Even so, he had to try. If Robb refused absolutely, the crown would likely leave the Watch to perish. As they rode away, heading out of the city, Ned's thoughts spiraled. Could he convince Robb to compromise, to at least negotiate? Pride and vengeance had consumed too many. Perhaps Robb might see the truth. No crown was worth more than the survival of the living. Ned prayed he would. Otherwise, the wave of darkness creeping from the north would swallow them all, and no southern throne would be left to rule. But first, Ned needed to reach the western battlefields alive. War abounded, Lannister outriders prowled, and time was running out. The others did not wait. Winter was coming in all its fury, and the realm was too divided to see the storm on its doorstep. Ned only hoped that somewhere, somehow, the living could still unite against the onrushing night, before it was too late.